Good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to call the April 28th, 2020 regular school board meeting to order. The first item today is to accept our agenda. Madam Superintendent, are there any revisions to the agenda as printed?
There are. Item C5, approval of the March 17, 2020 school board meeting revised. Item C14, Kathleen Middle repair tornado damage buildings update attachment. Item C29, superintendent's recommendation on charter school applications update attachment. Attorney's report add attachment. That's it for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to have a motion and a second for the acceptance of the agenda today. Do I have a first? I can't tell. Let's see. Ms. Reynolds, and a second? Ms. Fields, it looks like. Okay, I have a motion and a second to accept the agenda. Are there any further discussions? Seeing none, I'd like to call. That wasn't it. It is?
I can unmute. Can anyone hear me? Okay. I'm gonna go through the list. Mr. Wilson, can you unmute your mic and speak?
Did you ask me to unmute?
Thank you. I can hear you.
Okay, sorry for that. We had a technical difficulty. So we were talking about having the acceptance of the agenda, and I have a motion by Ms. Reynolds and a second by Ms. Fields. There was no discussion, so I was calling for a vote. All those in favor of accepting the agenda, please signify by saying aye. Raise your hands. Sorry. All those opposed, like sign. Motion carries. The next thing on our agenda is I would like to ask Board Member Kay Fields to give our invocation today. Ms. Kay,
Thank you.
if you'd be so kind.
Yes, ma'am. Let's bow our heads, please. Can you hear me?
Who?
We can hear Ms. Fields.
I can't hear anything.
I'm not muted. I'm unmuted, so I don't understand why you can't hear me.
We can hear you. Somebody said.
We can
Go
hear-
ahead, Ms. Fields, if you'd like to with the prayer. I just can't hear. That's why it's acting weird. No. Okay. Oh, my dear. Ms. Fields, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can't hear her. Now what? She put the volume for myself, but I can't hear Ms. Fields. Can someone else speak?
I
Let me
can-
see if it's just her, but you're unmuted,
can.
Ms. Fields.
I can hear Ms. Fields. Can you hear me,
I
Madam
can't
Chair?
hear
Yes.
anything.
Okay.
That's what I did.
We can hear you all. She's.
Oh,
not
I
able
can't
to
take
hear.
it that loud. No, right there. I just can't hear them.
We can hear her, but she's not able to hear us.
That's correct. You can hear me?
We can hear you. And we can hear Ms. Fields. I can hear Ms. Fields.
Okay, am I praying now?
What do you want me to do? No, sir. I can't hear anybody. Oh, seriously. Is there a particular side that's right or left?
No, ma'am. Can you hear us?
No.
Can you hear me, Madam Chair?
Somebody talk.
Can you hear me, Madam Chair? This is Billy. Can you hear me? I'm talking. No?
No.
Her mic is locked.
Here. Still. Okay. Somebody talk.
Can you hear me now?
Go ahead.
Hear me now?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Okay, can you bring that computer here? Is that what we're saying? But then how are you going to be in the thing? What am I supposed to do here? Yes, sir. I can put it over here.
Is it possible that the audio isn't on her computer, like the setting got flipped, or that she's not somehow? I'll just be quiet.
Talk.
Can you hear us, Ms.
Yes.
Cunningham? Thank you.
Yes, I sure can. Okay, which one
All right,
works here? Judd? You left me? The red one. The red one? Okay.
ready now?
Yes, ma'am.
All right,
Okay,
let's
here we
pray.
go. All right.
Most Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for the opportunity to come together and to transact your business, Father. And we pray that you will help us, Lord, to just calm down and to understand that you are in control of everything. Father, we pray a special blessing tonight for our board chair, as you will help her to navigate this meeting tonight, Lord God. We know you can do that. We are trusting in your word. We lift up our superintendent of schools and her team. We thank you, Lord, for all that they have been doing over the last month, the heavy lift that they've all carried. We are so thankful and so grateful for them. We thank you, Lord, for our teachers. We thank you for our students, Lord, and their families as they're trying to navigate distant learning. Father, we seek your guidance, and we seek your understanding, and we seek your encouragement, especially for the teachers that have children that they're trying to homeschool and teach our students, Lord God. And Father, we pray for everybody that has been impacted by COVID-19. We lift them up individually and collectively. And Father, we pray that we remember why we are here, that we are here to represent our students to the best of our ability. And Father, where there is discord, help us, Lord, to come to some type of unison, Lord God, so that we can be all working towards one common goal, which is, again, for our students. And we're going to be mindful that when we get to the end of our journey, that we're going to give you all the honor, you're going to get all the glory, and you're going to get all the praise. We ask all these things in your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Mrs. Fields. That was a beautiful prayer. Next, I would like to ask our board assistant, Susan Warbington, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone could please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You all may be seated. The next item is our special recognitions. Mrs. Bird, would you lead us through our special recognition today?
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Lynn Wilson to please read the proclamation.
I'll be happy to do that. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes, sir.
Proclamation, School Board of Polk County, Bartow, Florida. Whereas Florida is committed to protecting its most vulnerable and empowering our children to reach their full potential and lead healthy lives, and whereas each of Florida's 4 million children deserves a safe, healthy, and happy home where they are developmentally and educationally on a path to success. And whereas child abuse, neglect, and other adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, can severely impact a child's lifelong health and well-being. And whereas children who are abused and neglected may suffer physical injuries, emotional and psychological difficulties, and long-term effects of trauma. And whereas most parents in Hardy, Highlands, and Polk County want to do what's best for their children and agree that they can be a better parent when they have support. And whereas research shows that parents and caregivers who have support systems and seek help in times of trouble are more resilient and better able to provide safe environments and nurturing experiences for their children. And whereas every person should make children a top priority and take meaningful action to support children and families in their communities. And whereas in collaboration with the Governor's Office of Adoption and Child Protection, the Florida Department of Children and Families, Heartland for Children, and the Ounce of Prevention Fund of Florida implement Pinwheels for Prevention. And whereas Pinwheels for Prevention is a statewide coordinated campaign aimed to increase awareness of child abuse prevention efforts by encouraging healthy child development, positive parenting practices, and community support. And whereas the blue and silver pinwheel displays in this campaign are used to symbolize the health and happiness all children deserve. And whereas Child Abuse Prevention Month is an opportunity to encourage all Floridians to put children first and engage in activities that strengthen families and communities. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the School Board of Polk County, Florida proclaims April 2020 as Child Abuse Prevention Month.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. And now I'd like to ask Mrs. Warbington to please read Veruc Simmons' comments with the Heartland for Children into our public record.
Good evening. Comments from Ms. Simmons with Heartland for Children. Superintendent Byrd and school board members, please accept our sincere thanks for proclaiming April as Child Abuse Prevention Month, and most importantly, for the work that is done in schools each and every day to educate and support children and families. Most parents want to do what's best for their children, and when a community works together to make sure they have the services and supports they need, families thrive. We thank you for your partnership serving families that are involved in the child welfare system and your commitment to Crystal Lake Elementary, a community partnership school. We thank all of your staff who work so hard every day, but especially those key staff members that collaborate on systems and supports with us routinely, including John Hill, Kristen Fowler, Rachel Pleasant, Jeanette Crowley, and J.D. Fout, relating to the Community Partnership School, and Dr. Steinke, Jim Maxwell, Dee Dee Wright, Sherry Scott, Diane Taylor, Amy Randall, and our DCF Heartland liaisons at each school who partner with us as we strive to make sure children and families have the supports they need to be successful and prevent child abuse and neglect.
Thank you, Mrs. Warbington. The next item on our agenda is public comments on agenda items. Mrs. Warbington, is there anyone that has submitted comments regarding an item on the regular agenda today?
Yes, ma'am. Our first comment comes in regards to item R28. It's from Stephanie Yoakum, President of the Polk Education Association, regarding PEA salary and contract negotiations. Good evening. PEA is excited that the board will ratify our teacher contract tonight. Under our new contract, teachers gain significant planning time and lesson planning autonomy, among many other improvements to working conditions that will only enhance the quality instruction teachers give to our students every day. While the PEA bargaining team and each teacher, paraeducator, and ESP that we represent remains unhappy about the salary freeze for the 1920 school year, We also understand the dire financial situation Polk faces. We came to an agreement that the small amount of new money Polk received for this school year would go toward shoring up our bleeding health plan. This was a one-time only deal, and PEA will not sacrifice salary movement for our units next time. Before the COVID-19 situation occurred, our state legislator approved the biggest salary package for public education that we've seen in over a decade, thanks to public education advocacy statewide. While that money is still not what is needed to pay our people what they deserve, it's a start. Now, in the midst of the uncertainty with our state budget due to COVID-19, we need you, our elected board members and our superintendent, to stand up and speak out to our state legislators that they must preserve the education budget. We need you to stand up and speak out to our federal, congressional, and Senate representatives to demand they bail out public infrastructure, our schools, police, and fire, just like they intend on handing over $4.5 trillion to Wall Street. We must all demand that Florida not balance their budget on the backs of public schools like they did over a decade ago, for which our human capital is still paying the price of those budget decisions with years of stagnant wages and feelings of resentment and disrespect. Your educators, wall to wall, have answered the call time and again to prioritize students first. We changed our whole way of work at the drop of a hat in the middle of a crisis so our students could continue to learn, be fed, and feel some sort of routine and normalcy, and most of all, love from their teachers and who all serve them. We put our students first, and now we need you to put your staff first. Demand that our state and federal representatives put public schools first with budgets and bailouts. We are the backbone of society, and it's time that every single elected official and public education leader treats us as such. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Warbington. Are there other comments?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
This comment is in regards to item R29. It's from Steve Abney. His address is 234 Gulf Air Boulevard, Winter Haven, Florida. Greetings. I oppose approval of the application by Mi Escuela Montessori School for the following reasons. The Polk County School Board, acting on behalf of Polk County taxpayers, will have little influence over the operation of MEM if the school opens. Therefore, it is critical that the district ensure all the plans for the school are adequate. Despite submitting 2 documents for 2 years and hiring a charter school consultant to assist with the application process, MEM continues to have areas where it does not meet the standard, and in one case, fails the standard. Staffing for ESE students is inadequate. Page 32 of the analysis details this. MEM apparently plans to use the same part-time educator for both ESE and gifted students, but provides no explanation of how that would work. The board of MEM is not reflected in state documents and did not participate in the review process. This appears to be a one-horse rodeo. MEM does not know where it will locate. Even after 2 years of study, they say the proposed school will be in South Lakeland, Bartow, Mulberry, or Highland City. It is hard to believe in the current environment that the school will find a location, prepare it for the fall semester, hire staff, recruit students, and hit the ground running. MEM conflates safety and security. Its safety plan does not mention transportation safety, food safety, anti-bullying, building safety, or anything other than active shooter as a possible safety concern. MEM funding seems shaky. The explanations don't help. Please reject this application as inadequate.
Thank you.
Do you have any other comments?
No, ma'am.
Okay. If seeing no other comments, we shall proceed. Board members, now we need to approve one set of minutes. Today's set of minutes is for the February 11th, 2020 school board meeting. The chair will entertain a motion to accept the March 17th, 2020 school board meeting minutes as printed. What is the pleasure of the board? I saw Mr. Wilson, so I'm going to say Mr. Wilson made the motion and Ms. Reynolds seconded. So I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I would like to call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye with your hands up. Everybody put your
Aye.
hands up. Yep, those opposed, nay. The motion carries unanimously. The next item is the approval of the consent agenda for April 28th, 2020. The chair will entertain a motion to accept the April 28th, 2020 consent agenda as revised. Do I have a motion? Ms. Fields, do I have a second? Ms. Fortney? So I have a motion by Ms. Fields and a second by Ms. Fortney. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hands up. Those opposed, nay. The motion carries unanimously. The next item is our new administrator announcement. Ms. Byrd, do we have any announcements today?
We do not have any at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Byrd. Next, we come to our regular agenda. Under administration legal, we have item R25, resolution, temporary suspension of school board policies during certain emergencies. The chair will entertain a motion to approve resolution 2019-2020-12, temporary suspension of school board policies during certain emergencies. What's the pleasure of the board? I have a motion by Ms. Reynolds and a second by Ms. Fields. Is there any further discussion? Hang on, we do. Mrs. Miller.
Here. I mentioned this in the work session, and I was trying to understand the reasoning for this. We have policy, not only the executive 132 that covers this about allowing the superintendent, because we desperately needed her to do things during an emergency, and we're all very pleased with what took place. But my question is, I am trying to understand the reasoning for this document. There isn't a lot in it that we don't already follow. Just following it because it came from, a governor or even a federal order that changed daily. I'm not comfortable with approving this.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Miller. Mr. Townsend?
Do you see my screen?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, I've submitted a change to section 4. That is what would lead me to support this. It adds that it's the part about the superintendent shall keep the school board timely apprised. What I've added at the bottom, and I sent this to Wes and to the superintendent and to Susan, and they can send it to the whole board. I guess that's the appropriate way to do it. But I'm proposing that the superintendent keep us aware by email as necessary and appropriate, and on a weekly basis via remote meeting. At that meeting, the board will continue to vote or end the emergency authority. And my thinking on this is, I have a lot of thoughts on this, but in the simplest way, we would have a little hour update each week, at which the superintendent can update us on the emergency issues. We can ask questions, she can answer them, or she could delegate this to staff. Doesn't have to be her. And then we just keep renewing the authority if we feel like it. We should. I think that would accomplish what this resolution is trying to accomplish, while also making sure that the constitutionally elected officials are performing their role. As written, if you read this resolution as a whole, it's a complete abrogation of the board role completely. It might as well abolish the board. There's no point in us existing. I was amused. Wes, I asked for a regular meeting schedule, sort of along these lines back in April, and Wes sent us all a note that said, quote, "To date, no items of an emergency nature have been identified which would trigger the need for an emergency meeting of the school board. But apparently there's been enough emergency to eliminate the school board, entirely. This is not just an academic exercise. I want to depersonalize this for just a second and think about the roles. Like, again, there's the role of the elected school board. There's the role of the appointed superintendent. There's the role of the commissioner of education and the governor. What happens when there's a decision made about how school is going to unfold in August, and a majority of the board doesn't agree with the superintendent's take on it, who doesn't agree on the governor's take on it? Because there's going to be potential for a lot of, even amongst people of goodwill who want to collaborate, the governor, the superintendent, and us may all see different versions of safety or equity. Who ultimately has the responsibility to order those schools open, or to order a particular model? Who ordered them closed? We didn't. We never voted. I'm not sure if we need to vote now to ratify the closure of them, but that was a pretty obvious decision. I think the decision may be a little less clear come August, and we would do well to have this discussion now and in an ongoing way, so that we're not at total cross purposes with each other potentially. I think that's important. And there's also been, up till this point, the decision making has been pretty easy. The operations have been very hard. To do what's been done has been a tremendous amount of administrative work. But from the superintendent's point of view, she's about to get into a whole bunch of really difficult policy type decisions. How to open the schools, how to do graduations. I completely support the theory behind the graduation plan, but we haven't discussed that. And are we talking about having 3,000 people out on a, I assume we're not, but those are the kind of things that it's in the superintendent's position's interest to have the elected political board aligned and to have these kind of discussions and hash these things out. It's not because anybody's mad at anybody, thinks anybody's doing a bad job. I think superintendent's done a very good job. I think staff's done a very good job. But these decisions are going to get harder and harder and harder, and for the board to simply not have a role in it, and to just meet, we have 2 more meetings scheduled before school starts again, one in June, 1 in July. I think that's not good public policy, and it puts the superintendent completely out on an island. Anyway, that's my take. I mean, I'm not going to support this because I'm not going to voluntarily abrogate my role unless that change is made. I would be open to discussing the frequency, but that's going to be the structure on which I will support it.
Thank you, Mr. Townsend. Mrs. Miller?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This may be maybe semantics, because the email that you sent talking about emergency meetings, in our bylaws, there's special meetings that can be called. It doesn't have to be, and I know what you were saying about emergency crisis wise. Yes, we were in the middle of a crisis. There wasn't anything additional. I think is what you were trying to say. But as far as special meetings to keep the public informed, as we are duly noted to do, I think we should be doing that. The board can discuss what it looks like and how often, but we are responsible to the public. It's in our policy, it's in our bylaws. We have to answer to the public who are looking for us to know and to be very engaged. That's not doing the job for staff, that's knowing what's happening. And so when you explained emergency meetings, can you give us the background that there could be special meetings called? There could be something additional to what we're doing called per our bylaws. Is that right?
Mr. Bridges?
I'm trying to unmute. Got it.
Okay.
The statute talks about regular meetings and special meetings. You're required to have regular meetings, and special meetings can be called in addition to that. They can be called by the superintendent. They can be called by the chair by the superintendent at the request of the chair, or they can be called by a majority of the school board. Emergency meetings are not provided in the statute. That is a creature of policy, and those are held when there are decisions that have to be made that immediately affect the health, safety, and welfare of the public, including our students. So the comment had to do with the fact that everything that the actions that the superintendent needed to take, she was able to take. They did not require any additional board actions. The proposed resolution is one that is offered to you by Neola, which is the policy consultant that the board contracts with to make sure that their policies are in line with federal and state law, and they're kept current. This was a recommendation from them. You are not required to adopt it, but I would call it a housekeeping matter. What it is designed to do is to align your policies with the statute. As we've talked about before, you have policies that are mirror images of statutes. This resolution is designed as a housekeeping matter to make sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. If there are any policy decisions or any policy level actions that need to be taken in response to the emergency that do not strictly comply with the existing school board policy, would allow the superintendent and the board the flexibility to do that. It's similar in nature to the governor's executive orders, which you will recall. He waives particular statutes that allows us to take advantage of that. But Neola has suggested that adopting this resolution is a clean way and an audit trail to make sure that there is clear authority for those actions to be taken under the emergency circumstance. Once again, it is offered. Your policies already have broad delegations in them. I don't think anybody's going to bleed out on the floor if you decide not to do it, but it does perfect the audit trail from statute to policy to the resolution.
So Florida Statute 1001 that already covers this is sufficient for me. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. Ms. Fortney?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not going to support this either. I feel like nothing has hindered Superintendent Byrd from doing an outstanding job in the staff. And if something had come up, you know, and again, I do feel like we need to be meeting more often in general, with or without COVID-19. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fortney. Ms. Reynolds?
Thank you, Ms. Cunningham. I just wanted to bring up, we do have one already in place that we do every year for state of emergencies. Specifically, normally in Florida, we're looking at hurricane season. That I believe comes up for renewal at our May meeting. But I do, while we're on this topic, I would hate to have seen what happened if the night we had the Kathleen tornado hit, the superintendent had to gather us all for a meeting before she could do anything. I think it's crucial that she does have the ability to act when there's a true state of emergency happening. And I don't want her to not be able to act because she has to wait for us to become available to gather, whether that's 2 hours or 24 hours. I think she needs to be able to act in the best interest of our students when the need arises. So I want to make sure I will be supporting this tonight, but I think it's also important that we look at the one coming up before us in May to support that as well as we approach what's supposed to be an active hurricane season.
Thank you, Ms. Reynolds. Ms. Fields?
I agree with Ms. Miller and with Ms. Reynolds. And I don't remember how many years back, but we put this in place because of the hurricane season. And I don't really understand why we're having to even have this before us tonight. One of the things that I think the public needs to understand, if they aren't aware, is Ms. Superintendent Byrd does an amazing job communicating with us on a weekly basis. Sometimes she gives us more than one weekly update. She calls us if it's necessary. So it's not like we are not being communicated to and we're not being informed. And when it's time for our schools to reopen, I hope that we will work towards whatever the CDC folks tell us that we need to do and have communication. I don't think that Ms. Byrd would do anything without making sure that it's communicated to the board. So again, I'm like Ms. Miller. I don't see why we're doing this tonight. I understand what Mr. Bridges is saying. I am okay with what's here. If we need to have more meetings, I'm not in support of a weekly meeting. We have a meeting scheduled 2 weeks from today, I believe, for the month of May. I'm not sure what comes after that, but I know we have at least one and sometimes 2 meetings a month. So I think we have to look at the calendar and then determine from that, based on what we have before us, whether or not we need to meet more frequently.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Mr. Wilson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had some serious concerns about this as well, and I gave it a lot of thought. I read through it carefully, sent an email to Mr. Bridges, and I fall back on section 5, which says this resolution shall take effect immediately upon its adoption and remain in effect until the state of emergency is lifted or until further action of the school board to extend or rescind this action. And from my perspective, really what that says is that nothing has changed. We have always, anytime there might be concerns about a superintendent, and I don't direct this at Superintendent Byrd, any superintendent oversteps their bounds, the school board has the authority and the ability to react. And so I don't see this as being anything new. I agree with Mr. Bridges. It seems to be housekeeping. And really, from my perspective, it's more along the lines of an audit issue, could conceivably create an audit challenge for us. So I will be supporting it. I understand my colleagues' concerns. I felt that way as well before I really thought it through. And not to say that they didn't. I respect all of their opinions, but I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Townsend?
Okay, how do I amend the motion to adopt my substitute language for section 4? Like, because I've shared that with superintendent and I asked Susan to share with the board. I don't just now. I don't know if she did or not. Was able to or not. But there's specific language that
We currently have a motion and a second for this resolution the way it stands. Should we take the vote first? Mr. Bridges?
Madam Chair, I would suggest that you take the vote. If the vote fails, a secondary motion can be made.
That's what I thought. Thank you,
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Bridges.
all right. While I'm after that, then, and we can either get this on the record now, or you can wait till my comments. I want to know how many board members are in fact willing to have a hour-long weekly update through the summer. For us as a board, this is not about the superintendent's communication to us.
Okay. Mr. Townsend, could you hold that? Right now, we're trying to vote on this item. Could we get through this item and then we can discuss that? Because the
Yes,
two aren't
sure.
related to me. You're trying to
Well,
set.
well, they are to me.
Okay, well, let's get through the vote and then we can discuss it. How's that?
It's fine.
Okay, so right now we have a motion by Ms. Reynolds and a second by Ms. Fields. Am I correct? For resolution 25, the way it stands, temporary suspension of school board policies during certain emergencies. So I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye or raise your hand so I can see. So we have 3.
No, Mr. Wilson.
I didn't see. Mr. Wilson, is your hand up?
No, my hand is not up. I had an additional comment and before we voted, but I am not, I've changed my mind. I am not voting for it at this time.
Okay, sorry. Okay.
I understand. It's a different.
Okay, so we've got, and all those opposed, now raise your hands.
No.
1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so the motion doesn't carry. So, Mr. Townsend, what would you like to present?
I would like to move approval of the motion. I'm sorry, of the resolution substituting the language that I shared with the superintendent and Wes, and I thought I'd shared it with Susan to share with all of you. I can read it to you if you would like, or have my screen shared. But
What's the pleasure of the board? I have not seen it.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Townsend and a second by Mr. Wilson to approve a change in resolution for the 2019-2020-12, and then someone needs to read it. Mr. Bridges?
I'd be happy to.
Okay. Unmute.
Am I muted again?
You're muted again. Yes, sir.
I lose track of who's unmuting whom. The revised language that Mr. Townsend proposes for section 4 reads, the superintendent shall keep the school board timely apprised of all procedures implemented and actions taken related to the implementation of mandates or directives from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Florida Department of Education, Florida Department of Health, or executive orders of the governor of the state of Florida, including any actions taken that are contrary to school board policy, by email as necessary and appropriate, and on a weekly basis by a remote meeting. At each regular meeting, the board will vote to continue or end the emergency authority.
Thank you. Now we have some comments. Ms. Miller?
Proponent of meeting more often. If this is how we're going to make the decision to meet more often and linking it into this is fine. I do think that making the public aware and making the board members aware, I'm someone who, if I apologize that I don't call in, but I don't get phone calls. So reading weekly emails on a Friday of what already had been done, I think I would like to have been aware of some of that ahead of time so I could help spread the good news and the messages of what we're doing. And I think it's going to get very sticky in the next few months and what that's going to look like. And the public is going to look to their elected board members to be aware of what's happening. It's covered in part of our policy. So I would support meeting. If this is how we're going to build it into meeting, then I would support this change.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Ms. Reynolds?
I would be very concerned to say that we have to have a phone call once a week, just because if we look at the number of people, we can't just have a phone call with the 7 of us and the superintendent. There's a lot that goes into that clearly by looking at how many people had to be in the room and available today. They have to be public meetings. That I would be cautious of how many people we're pulling into a meeting that we need doing the work of the district. Particularly looking at IT as we're virtually learning for the next month or so. I think once a week is too frequently to require a phone call. I think having an email weekly, certainly, and more frequently if necessary, but I think weekly for a phone call is for an update, if it's not going to be items that we need to take action on, is way too frequently to be pulling our staff from what they're doing in their daily jobs. I think that we can give them direction either bi-weekly or monthly as our meetings are set, but I don't want to be pulling staff weekly to be on a call with us when they can send us those updates via email.
Thank you, Ms. Reynolds. Ms. Fields?
I agree with Ms. Reynolds. I think that it's an added burden on the superintendent and her staff. It's a heavy lift right now, just trying to do the distant learning and everything else that they have before them. I don't think that there is any need for us to have a weekly remote call. If we wanted to maybe consider a bi-weekly, every 2 weeks maybe, but not weekly. So I will not be supporting this motion.
Okay. Do you have any others? Mr. Bridges?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Am I live? Thank
Yes.
you. I do want to advise you there, if the board has additional conversations of that sort, they must have the formality of a school board meeting. They have to be noticed. There needs to be an agenda. It needs to be run like a school board meeting, and there need to be minutes. So it would actually have the same formality as what you're doing right now. Can you do it? You certainly can. But if you do it, it must be done in accordance with Chapter 286. It has to be a meeting of the school board. It's not a conference call. It may be a virtual meeting, but it is a meeting of the school board with all of those formalities.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Fortney?
Any way we could change that wording to be bi-weekly?
Yes, that's what I was. Yes, okay. Thank you for that. Mr. Townsend is up next.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in a regular cadence. This meeting is not just so the superintendent can update us individually. It's to update us as a group. We are a body that is supposed to work together as a team or hash out our differences as a group. We all represent the same people, but we're different personalities, different points of view, and we're going to need to talk these things through in settings like this, or else we're going to have big problems. And I think we will save the superintendent a lot of headaches and save ourselves a lot of headaches and the public a lot of headaches if we get disciplined enough to have an hour and a half long formal meeting on one evening every 2 weeks, in which we hash out the 2 or 3 most important emergency issues that are coming from this. I don't want to do any of the stuff we did today in the work session here. I want to do specific COVID stuff that we have to make decisions about. Like, we're not going to be able to vote again on the graduation ceremony, I don't think, timing wise. So we're just going to have to rely on those being safe. That concerns me. you know, like kids are already very excited about that. I've seen the reaction to it. You know, so I think it's important that we're having a cadence where these really thorny, difficult, fast-moving issues are addressed, so we don't end up hurting each other. You know, like or not hurting each other. That's not what I mean. Not so that we can be as aligned as we can possibly be. I'm happy to do that. You know, every 2 weeks if that brings everybody on board. And I think we'll be better off for it. I really do. So anyway, I will certainly change that to every 2 weeks.
Okay. Ms. Reynolds?
Right. Looking at the calendar, could we have it read at least twice a month? Just looking at how they fall. I don't want to move our meeting schedule from what it currently is because those have already been noticed. If we can make it at least twice a month, that way the meetings that are already scheduled can remain on their regular dates.
Yes, and then we could supplement like we did one board meeting, and then the other one would be work session, and keep it going that way with the work session and board meeting on one Tuesday and the work session on the other. Ms. Fields?
We have a meeting on May the 14th. Isn't our next meeting on May the 14th?
I think it's May 12th. Let me look.
Okay, so we do have a meeting within the next 2 weeks.
Yes, 2 weeks. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's my point. And I would imagine that the superintendent would be bringing us information about graduation at that time, if not before. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. Wilson?
My question is for Mr. Bridges. How do we amend the motion, Mr. Bridges?
Mr. Townsend.
He did.
Mr. Townsend has indicated, this tells me I'm unmuted. Mr. Townsend has indicated that he wishes to make a motion with that language. I don't recall that we've had a second and it hasn't been called for a vote.
Actually,
So,
we have a
yes.
second.
So,
Yeah, Mr. Wilson seconded.
oh, okay, so we have
Yes.
a second.
We do.
What, and this is, it's always a little awkward, but if Mr. Townsend wishes to amend his motion and you will second his amendment, then you can proceed to a vote on that language. We will make the changes to the language afterwards so that it can be signed by the chair.
So clearly, Mr. Townsend made that, agreed with that, those changes. So I second that we have meetings every other week. Is that what I'm hearing from everybody? No?
Twice
monthly.
Twice a month.
Twice a month.
Second is that we have meetings twice a month.
Yes. Hold on. Sarah Fortney.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that it's not just a work session, but it's actual board meeting, both times a month.
Okay, all right. We need discussion about that because I thought we would just go back to the way we've been. So, because Billy said he just wanted to have conversation every couple weeks. Okay, let's go to Mr. Townsend. Let's get that cleared up.
Sorry. All right. So here's, I'm sorry, my computer's acting funny, showing something in my face. What I would suggest, what I want to see, and you guys react to this how you want, is 2 COVID specific update collaboration meetings per month. So that means like the May 15th meeting wouldn't be one of those. You could just substitute that for that. I mean, now I'm okay with having that on May 15th if you want.
May 12th.
12th, whatever. But I want, what happened today, we had a month and a half of stuff built up that we didn't get to talk about today because we had a jammed full agenda because we don't meet enough. I think had we been able to have some discussion about what the superintendent told us at the beginning of the meeting today, you know, like, but we didn't have time. And I want to make sure, I don't particularly see these meetings being more than an hour or an hour and a half long. I'm happy for one of them to be on the date of the regular meeting. But I think we need I just want to make sure there are 2 blocks of time that are dedicated to COVID specific stuff. And that's what I'm trying to get at. And they would be, of course, regular meetings, Sarah, because we might have to vote on them. You know, does that make sense to everybody?
And I would remind the board that a work session is a meeting at the school board,
Correct.
period.
Correct.
Okay.
I'm talking to the screen again.
Ms. Miller?
No, sorry.
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just want to be very cautious of packing what we already do. This is the third time I'm saying it. We are elected to serve the public, and squishing everything into a 2-hour session and not being able to talk about issues is taxing. It's taxing on the board members who are engaged, who listen to the public every day. It's taxing on the staff who are trying to, push all of this into one meeting. So I agree that if you're proposing doing it on May 12th and every, twice a month, we do need to make sure there's time allotted for work session items, and then we can call it an update. The superintendent can decide what she'd like to call it, but we need to make sure there's enough time allotted. It's just it doesn't do a service to the public or to the board members that are answering the phone every day, not to get this information out.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Mrs. Fields?
I would like to hear from the superintendent. We're having conversation, but what does the superintendent think? We have been doing one work session, and then the next time we've had a board meeting. And so if you do two board meetings monthly, that again is going to be an added burden on the staff. So can we hear from Ms. Bird?
Yes, hi. So let me be clear, are we talking 2 board meetings a month? Because as soon as you said 2 board meetings, are we talking about 2 board meetings?
Madam Superintendent, any meeting that involves the school board of Polk County must be a board meeting. If they're discussing board business, it's duly noticed. It is a board meeting. There's an agenda. There will be minutes. I want to make sure there's no confusion. It can be in the form of a conference call, or in the form of a Zoom meeting, or in the form of a virtual meeting of any sort. But anytime the board is collectively discussing board business, that is a meeting of the school board of Polk County. It requires notice. It requires a time certain. It requires the accessibility by the public. In terms of viewing, it requires, now, I don't want to get things confused. Public comment is not required at every meeting. It is only required before the board acts on an item. It doesn't have to be at the same meeting. That can be done at a different time or the same time. But before the board takes an action, there has to be an opportunity for public comment, and minutes must be taken. So those are the requirements of 286.
Okay. Right, I understand the noticing of the board meeting, but I was making sure we're talking about a board meeting. We just talked, because I heard having meetings for updates for COVID, and now I'm hearing board meetings. So that's what I'm trying to clarify here.
Yes, ma'am. It feels like we're talking about 2 different things, right. But the resolution specifically had the language that said that the superintendent would keep the board apprised. Mr. Townsend has moved that language be amended to a bi-monthly, and it will be a virtual meeting. It's a virtual meeting of the school board.
Okay, so as a virtual meeting, it's going to be
And
noticed.
and I can conform the language to reflect that, but I believe the intent is for as far as this resolution goes, is to require a bi-monthly meeting of the school board so that they can exchange this information.
Okay.
So for me now, to make sure I understand, we are wanting to have 2 regular work session and board meeting twice a month. Whereas in the past, we've had a work session and board meeting on one Tuesday. And then 2 weeks later, we had just the work session. So we're moving that to having 2 full work sessions and board meetings each month. Am I correct?
I think we're conflating 2 or 3 different things. The resolution that we're addressing right now, Mr. Townsend has proposed that we include language that says that the superintendent will, on a bi-weekly basis, by a remote meeting, will clean up the language, a virtual meeting.
Okay.
But that the superintendent, let me make sure. The superintendent will keep the board timely apprised by email as necessary and appropriate, and on a bi-weekly basis via virtual meeting. Now, the language at the end talks about at each regular meeting, the board will vote to continue or end emergency authority. This is not a regular meeting. This is a special. We would call it a special, but I don't want to get everybody confused. The intent of the resolution isn't focused on how many times the board meets. It's focused on whether or not you wish to grant emergency authority to the superintendent with respect to school board policy. You can include this language in here, and I think it will require, if you do, it will require the superintendent to schedule and conduct 2 virtual meetings of the school board each month. I would not get hung up on whether it's a work session or a board meeting. All work sessions are board meetings. So this means that there would be at least 1 additional virtual board meeting each month during the pendency of the emergency.
Okay, we have a lot of comments. Let's start with Mr. Townsend.
This might be an easier way for people to organize it in their head. These meetings twice a month could have a single purpose, which is to vote again on the extension of the emergency authority. As we're having that discussion of that meeting, that's a excellent chance to make the case for why that has to be done. I mean, it's not even really making the case. It's showing what's been done, getting political agreement from the board. That might be an easier way to organize these in our heads, because there is going to be a vote. I would like to see us keep renewing this authority because I'm uncomfortable with granting it forever. And I just think that makes a natural, easy mechanism for it. I would prefer to see that done twice a month. In May, I guess that would mean either we have that done twice a month plus our regular meeting, or we build it into the regular meeting day. I can live with either, but I think twice a month, I would like to have a dedicated vote and discussion about what's happening with COVID. That's the purpose of what I'm trying to do.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Fortney?
No, I didn't have anything.
Okay, Ms. Fields?
I said earlier, and I repeat again, I will support a bi-weekly, twice monthly meeting. And as Mr. Bridges just said, call it whatever you want to call it. I'm not in support of having 2 board meetings and then another meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Ms. Reynolds?
Would it be possible for someone to send us the language? I am a visual person, so it's really hard for me to vote on something that I can't see how it's written. But I agree with Ms. Fields. I think that 2 meetings a month is great. I just want to make sure, we have some months that have more Tuesdays than others. So I'd like to make sure that the meetings that have already been published can maintain on those Tuesdays. So I think twice a month I can support. But again, if we please get the motion sent to us in writing, whatever the changes are, that would be very helpful.
Mr. Bridges? He's working
Okay,
on it, I think.
I forwarded Mr. Townsend's language, which of course will have to be cleaned up to change from weekly to biweekly or
No,
bi-monthly, semi-monthly, twice a month.
Mr. Wilson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, for a number of years, I don't know how many years, but we had regular board meetings twice a month. And we stopped that because we felt like it wasn't necessary. But it seems to me that it actually is necessary. I see where there are often times when we have things to talk about, issues, concerns, questions, and we always seem to be rushed and challenged to get everything done. So I have no problem whatsoever of having regular board meetings twice a month. We did that, as you well know, for many years.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. And I would like to echo the same. That's what I was trying to understand. Up until now and the COVID-19, since March 13th, we had 2 meetings a month. One was a work session, a board meeting, and the second Tuesday was a work session. And we included the round table for additional information where board members could comment and discuss items. So really all we're saying is we're going to go back to that, which we already have been doing. The only thing is there are some months where we've only designated 1 board meeting a month. For example, May. And the reason was that after May 12th, all of the graduations and ceremonies and all of that normally takes place in the month of May. And that's why there was only 1 scheduled. But now that the graduations may be happening in June, there's no reason why we can't meet again on the 28th, I think is, be the 28th of May. So we could schedule 2 meetings and then move forward that way. Is that what I'm hearing by consensus? Madam Superintendent, go ahead.
I think, am I good? I thought what I was hearing from Mr. Townsend is, and echoing what Ms. Sarah Beth Reynolds said, was that they wanted the bi-weekly meetings a month to discuss these separate issues like that. That's what I was hearing. So in other words, you'll have your meeting work session May 12th, followed by in 2 weeks.
Yes.
A meeting for the updates of certain things with COVID, what's going on. That's what I'm hearing. And is that what I'm hearing? And so I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
Because those updates I'm sending to you, and
Yes.
then there's no need to have an official, what we would call a board meeting in the boardroom. We'll be meeting.
Right, in a work
Yeah,
session
so
format.
a work session
Yes,
format,
I
2
understand.
weeks following.
Yes, ma'am. That's what I was trying to say. Okay, Ms. Reynolds? Did you have?
Sorry, I muted at the same time as I was unmuting. Yeah, that's what I was, Mrs. Bird said is what I was suggesting, is that our regularly scheduled meeting be a regularly scheduled meeting.
Yep.
Meetings on the off week be specifically to talk about COVID. If she has other items that she feels that her staff needs to bring forward, that's great. But if not, just making sure that we get the update in that week.
Okay, Mr. Wilson?
Well, again, and let me be clear about this. I know it's getting a little confusing. I'm in agreement with Ms. Reynolds and the superintendent and Ms. Fields, whatever we wish to do. But just to be crystal clear, we had 2 work sessions and 2 regular board meetings where we voted for the first, 2 or 3 years I was on the board. When we went to the new format, we agreed that we would try it on a temporary basis to see how it worked out. And it seems to me that it's clear to me now that we need some more time to talk about things. And I don't care what format that is. I don't care if it means 1 business meeting a month, but we used to have 2 formal board meetings, 2 formal business meetings a month. And when we left that format, it was agreed that we could come back to that if we felt like we needed it. So I'm struggling a little bit to understand why there would be reluctance to have 2 formal board meetings. We used to, and it seemed to work for us. But again, I'm fine with what everybody decides. Formal board meeting, and 2, whatever we want to call them, work sessions. That's okay with me too.
Ms. Fortney?
Agree with Mr. Wilson. Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Okay, Ms. Fields?
I know, I'm sorry, Ms. Cunningham. If my memory serves me correctly, one of the reasons why we changed the way that we were doing business is because it was very difficult and was an added burden for the staff. And as it relates to the items on the agenda, if we need to fine tune some of the things that's on the agenda and spread them out more or whatever, then we need to do that. Again, just if nothing else, just keep in mind, the staff not just have board meetings to prepare for, they're doing the distant learning, they're trying to figure out about graduation, they're trying to figure out what's gonna happen over the next few months for summer and then going into the fall. So they have a lot to chew on. So let's be mindful of that. I think doing what we have been doing, the work session and then a board meeting should be sufficient for us. And if it's not, let's come back and visit it later. But let's agree today that we will do the 2 meetings for the month, work session, and then the board meeting, work session.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Ms. Miller?
Okay, I'm unmuted. Just a little bit of perspective from the public, especially during my campaign, was asking why the board stopped meeting. We're a $1.7 billion organization. We are very capable of a meeting. And we can call it what you want right now, but I would like to return to the 2 board meetings at some point because I see the heaviness of these agendas. And if we want to really have good discussion to make good policy decisions, then we need to have that time scheduled. So I'm in agreement to adding however you want to call these meetings, but we do need to look at in the future meeting again. I mean, that's what the public expects of us. And I think the staff, they've done a great job and I'm sure they can, arise to the occasion.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Mr. Townsend?
I'm sympathetic to staff. I know how hard they're working, but ultimately we don't exist to serve staff. The board elected us to represent the public, and the public has great interest right now in a lot of things that are happening. What I would just suggest to the superintendent is like, say we have the 2 meetings this month. If you'll just agenda a discussion of COVID in both of those meetings, where we can hash things out, and then have an agenda item where we renew the emergency authority, because I think that's still what's on the table here. There's a 2-part thing for me. I don't want the emergency authority to go on forever, and I know that it won't. But I think if we just agenda that twice a month, and vote on it and have a discussion about the important COVID stuff that we need to discuss, that at least for me, I'll be covered. That's fine. That's fine for me, I think. And we'll just kind of go from there. Does that make sense?
I think that's good. And I think we need to move on. Is everybody, Ms. Fortney, you have one more comment?
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Miller. I always feel rushed, and I've been calling for a second board meeting forever. And it might, Ms. Fields, to ease your mind on staff, because I know they all work very hard, but it also could work out better for them because it's not all like in one big lump of information. It could maybe help. Just trying to look at the positive.
Okay, so to wrap this up, then, Mr. Bridges, do you have the amended language ready to read into the record? And I'm assuming Mr. Townsend will make the motion again, and then Mr. Wilson seconded it.
So the language in section 4 will be amended to read that the superintendent shall keep the board timely apprised by email as necessary and appropriate, and on a twice monthly basis via virtual meeting. At each regular meeting, the board will vote to continue or end the emergency authority.
Okay, so does the motion and the second still stand by both of you? Yes? Okay, all right, then I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion before I call for a vote? Okay. So I'd like to call for a vote on resolution 2019-2020-12, as Mr. Bridges read into the record. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye and raise your hand. Raise your hands. Can't see hands. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. So all those opposed, like sign. The motion carries unanimously. Our next item is R26, property insurance renewal. What is the pleasure of the board? I need a motion and a second so we can discuss. Ms. Fields, okay, and Ms. Miller. Okay. Do we have any discussions? I'm waiting to see Susan. Mr. Townsend.
Right. I pulled this off of consent, not for any kind of concerning reason or anything. Just it's a big number. It's what I read there is that because of the experience we've had with the Kathleen tornado and various other things, this was the best deal that we could get, but it's a pretty big jump in that amount. Is that the correct understanding, Madam Superintendent? Like that it's just sort of the reality of.
That is.
You could nod. Okay. I'm fine. I just wanted the public to understand why that's a pretty big jump.
Okay, any other comments? No. Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Fields and a second by Ms. Miller to approve R26 property insurance renewal. So I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye and raise your hands. Okay, all those opposed, like sign. All right, the motion carries unanimously. The next item is R27, recommendation of administrative and instructional personnel. What is the pleasure of the board? I need a motion and a second. Ms. Fields is made the motion and a second. Ms. Reynolds. Okay, we're open for discussion. Mr. Townsend.
So this is going to relate similarly to the really unpleasant discussion we had last month at our last meeting. So I also want to be clear. What I think I'm voting for here is the specific set of terminations, the separations that are identified within that agenda item. They're all related to being to separation during probation. There is a specific one that I have a lot of problems with as an individual, but I think as a whole, I don't like the probation model at this time. I think there's a humanitarian case to be made for voting against all of them, given the unemployment situation and the way the machines don't work. So anyway, what I think I'm voting against is the the specific terminations, not the overall moves. I don't want to hold up anybody's moves. They were put separately on the agenda. So that's what I want to do.
Is there any other discussion? Okay, if not, I'd like to call for a vote. We have a first by Ms. Fields. Yes, sorry, Ms. Fortney?
Sorry, I just want to clarify Mr. Townsend's comments. Probationary is part of state statute, correct, Mr. Bridges?
That is correct.
I mean, I may not agree with it, but, when I don't, but, I think Ms. Fields and I had this comment a month ago. I'm not going to do anything to get us in trouble, you know, so I don't agree with it. We should work on getting that changed at a state level. But that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Fortney. Ms. Reynolds? I can't hear you. Hold on.
Sorry, I didn't have a comment. I was raising my hand for the vote.
Okay. Ms. Fields?
I agree with Ms. Fortney, and I was gonna basically ask Mr. Bridges to remind us that this is a state law. This is nothing that we have control over. And I think Ms. Fortney pretty much handled that. So thank you, Ms. Fortney.
Yes, and ladies and gentlemen, bear in mind that the probationary termination statute doesn't require the district to terminate anyone. It merely says that if someone is terminated during that period, that no reason is given and there is no hearing. So there's no, it's not like a zero tolerance statute and a student expulsion. This is only used when the employer decides they wish to terminate someone during their probationary period. They can do that without further process.
Okay, any further discussion? Mr. Townsend?
Yeah, I was just Wes kind of made the point I was going to make.
Okay.
I don't dispute the legality. I dispute the judgment specific to one of them, and the humanitarian aspect of all of it at this moment. And so that's why I'm going to vote against it.
Thank you, Mr. Townsend. Ms. Miller?
This might be a question for later, but the statute says that we do not have to give reason. Does the districts have authority to give more information or give reason on firing or terminating?
Mrs. Miller, if you give a reason, it is not a probationary termination. And at that point, the individual is entitled to a hearing. It becomes a termination for cause. The whole purpose of the probationary termination statute is that it creates a separate category that does not require cause.
And some of these were for job abandonment, I read, which is definitely a cause to terminate, in my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Seeing none, I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye and raise your hands. 2, 3, 4. Wait a minute. Billy, you had your hand up, so it's not up, correct? No. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and those opposed, like sign? 1 nay. Okay, so the motion carries 6-1. The next item under Human Resource Services Annual Items, we have R28, Settlement of the 2019-2020 Teacher Salary and Contract Negotiations between the Polk Education Association Incorporated and the Polk County School District. What's the pleasure of the board? Mr. Wilson is got a motion and Ms. Reynolds is second. Okay. Is there any discussion? Ms. Fortney?
I love everything that happened. I was at every meeting as a bystander. I just can't swallow a freeze of any kind for money. I just can't. We'll never pay our people what they are worth. I get that. And I appreciate everybody that worked on this. I love the language. I love everything, but it just in my heart, I can't do it. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Townsend?
Couple of things. I think this deal shows the value of assertive collaboration, where the sides collaborated in a on something approaching equal strength. And when that happens, I think you get deals that are mutually satisfactory. I think that's a lesson for all of us to learn. It's not one side or the other. There are interests and goals that are never going to be exactly the same. But if we're both strong and we both know and we're both willing to talk to each other about it, we can come to good outcomes. In terms of the money at the local level, I think one of the things that's happened, there are some other districts around us who are able to give who are able to give some raises this year that are fairly significant, largely because they've finally dropped their reserves like we did too. I think that's I don't have chapter and verse of how many of these districts did, but districts like Orange and some others have had giant reserves for a long time. Some of us fought really hard to drop that fund reserve from 5% to 4%, and we turned that money, which is roughly $8 million a year, into $32 million that have gone to hold the line on insurance and to provide the modest pay raises we were able to provide until this year. I think it's incumbent upon all of us, as again, this is another reason why we have to be meeting as a board, as an organization, as a political group, because it's incumbent upon all of us to insist that the state of Florida stands by what it budgeted for teachers statewide. Now, it's not going to be easy for them to do that. They may not economically be able to do that, but we have to politically demand that they politically demand from the federal government that the federal government take care of that, which it certainly can. It's spending $4.5 trillion to prop up the stock market right now. I'm going to show a little bit more of this in my comments. I have a graph I want to show everybody, but keeping the full human capacity of the Polk district moving ahead is a political question, not an economic one. And we need to remember that, because we're a political body. We're elected by the public to express its political will about schools. And I think those are just several important things that come out of this deal.
Any other comments? Okay, if not, I have a few. I was also attended one of the bargaining sessions that we had, and I really enjoyed seeing both the PEA and our district team working together. I think it says a lot about who we are and who we're putting first. And yes, I understand that we're not able to do salaries for this past year with the hiring freeze, but I do hope that once we get this ratified, hopefully tonight by the board, and we can move on, we'll have the opportunity to be able to look at raises for the coming year. I think that's very important. So I want to say kudos to all the bargaining team. We're all in this together. We're educating our students the best we can. And I was just really proud to witness everybody working together and coming out with a common cause, and with a vote, 72% approved this new contract, and only 28% did not. So that says a lot about the people working, and says a lot about our teachers and those that this directly affects. So I think this is huge, and I hope we're able to pass this ratification tonight. Any other comments? If not, I'd like to call for a vote to approve the ratified 2019-2020 teacher salaries, the 2020 self-funded employee health plan, and teacher contract language. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye and raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, we got 6. And then those opposed, like sign. Okay, 1. So the motion carries 6-1. The next item under learning general items is R29, Superintendent's recommendation on charter applications. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the Mi Escuela Montessori charter application. Do I have a motion? Ms. Fortney, hold on. And a second. Ms. Fields. Okay, any discussion? Ms. Miller.
I just want to comment based on the comment that was sent in, or the question that was sent in from the community member. I think out of all the charter applications that we've looked at, this is one that had the most collaboration with our staff and with individually with board members. As far as ESC and IDE, or ESC and covering that, as well as gifted is the money that comes in with gifted is under the ESC umbrella. And there's been long conversation on how they'll handle that at that school. And that's very rare to see in any charter application or charter school that's not specifically for students who need support. So for them to go that far, I think was an olive branch, that they have good intent, an intention to hire an inclusion specialist so the students will not be secluded and be a part of the learning environments of their typical peers, I think is important. And so, yes, I understand the caution of charter, but having a school do something that we no longer provide and having local people involved, and it's not a group from the outside, it's not a big corporate system with multiple schools that will fail. I am glad to see this with us in this district, and I think that it'll be successful. I hope that it will be successful and we can see others like it. So I will be supporting this.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Ms. Reynolds?
I just want to echo a little bit of what Ms. Miller said. I mentioned this in the work session as well, but this application came to us last year and is a complete 180, I think, from last year's application. They've truly worked to solve all of the questions that we previously had. I know during the work session that they indicated there was a little bit of work to be done in the curriculum that they're looking to use for middle school, but that was something that could be resolved in contract negotiations. But I just want to thank the team at Mi Escuela for coming back and working with all of the parties involved to see how they could improve their application. I think this is a great example of what charters were intended to be, bringing a different educational model to the community than what we can provide with Polk County Public Schools. So I want to thank them for truly wanting to impact students in a positive way with a new dual immersion program.
Thank you, Ms. Reynolds. Mr. Townsend?
Right, I just want to sort of pile onto that. I mean, we were told this morning that the budget they presented was the best one that the charter committee had seen in 17 years. I think they said, like in terms of its quality and its detail. Additionally, this is a charter school that is trying to be more sort of anti-charter than law will allow it to be. It wants to have a weighted lottery. It wants to have a number of things that charter law won't actually allow it at the moment, which gives you an idea of how charter law in Florida works. So they have gone out of their way to be collaborative, and I think there's potential for us long term to have a lot of dual engagement with them. I mean, there's a lot of potential for collaboration between us. And one other thing that I think the commenter may not have understood, they're not going to open this fall. They're not trying to open until next fall. You know, they have this whole year to work things out. And really the only thing they got any kind of significant criticism for in the application was the accountability stuff. And I gotta tell you, in the model that Florida's in, like, I mean, the more you get dinged on accountability, as far as I'm concerned, the better your model is. You know, we're a backwards accountability measurement state, and you know, that's going to change, I think, over time. But you know, I this is probably the best I've felt about any charter school since I've been on the board. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that.
Thank you, Mr. Townsend. Mrs. Fields?
Basically, just want to kind of agree with what the majority of the board members have said, and that this is not anything that was not well worked. The process worked well, working with our staff, and they have very good intentions. They want to do what's best for the students that they're going to serve. And I said earlier that I have spoken to several other board members, and even though they weren't at the capacity interview, they basically wanted me to know that they were very much in support of the charter school application, and that they were going to do whatever was necessary to make sure that it is successful. So I will be supporting this application as well.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Ms. Fortney?
Yeah, my internet dropped during this portion of the work session, so I was only able to listen on my phone. And I wanted to thank them for applying. It's going to hopefully land in my district, which has a high need in that area. We have low socioeconomic folks, and I think that's who Kelly wants to serve. Our migrant population is high there, and I will definitely be supporting it. Thanks, that's it. All right.
Thank you, Ms. Fortney. Any other comments? Okay, so I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye and raise your hands. Thank you. And all those opposed, nay? The motion carries unanimously. The next item is R30, Charter School Projected Enrollment for School Year 2020-2021. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the request for an increase in enrollment per their approved charter applications for the 2021 school year for the following charter schools: Discovery High School, Edward W. Bach Academy North, and Victory Ridge Academy. What's the pleasure of the board? I need a motion. Mr. Wilson, and a second, Ms. Reynolds. And let's open it up for discussion. Ms. Miller.
Hi, I just want to state for the public that high-performing charters, they have this opportunity to increase enrollments from the state level. I made a point to say in the work session that if they are dropping students or not serving students that they originally agreed to serve, there's not much we can do at this point. So that's a legislative issue you might want to take up with our state legislators to a little more accountability in those. I think the ones listed are moving more to serve students, but at this point, they can move to increase their seats due to their performance.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Mr. Townsend.
I just want to be clear on what we're voting on real quick. So Discovery, Bach North, and Victory Ridge, they're not high performing, right? They're not on that.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Right.
They're in that second group.
So we're splitting these out.
We are. Yes, sir.
Right. But they're but the recommendation on those was to approve them. But that was correct.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
Yes, sir.
Well, and I think you look at Victory Ridge, they're a different kind of charter. They're doing services that are important, and
sure.
You know, so yeah, okay. That, it's fine.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Townsend. Anyone else? If not, I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye and raise your hands. Thank you. All those opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously. The next item is the chair will entertain a motion to approve the request for an increase in enrollment per their approved charter applications for the 2021 school year for Polk State College, Lakeland Gateway to College High School. I need a motion and a second. Motion by Mrs. Fields and a second by Ms. Reynolds. Okay. Is there any discussion? Mr. Wilson?
Madam Chair, I will be abstaining from voting on this matter due to my relationship with Polk State College, and I will work with Ms. Worthington to make sure the appropriate paperwork is filed.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wilson. Any further discussion? If not, let's call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye and raise your hands. Okay, all those opposed, like sign, raise your hand. Mr. Wilson, raise your hand, right? It's nay. Good. Oh, you're nay. That's right.
No, I'm
Sorry.
not opposing. I'm not opposing it. I'm
You're
abstaining.
not. You're just abstaining. Okay, so the motion carries six votes to 1 abstain. Next, we have the chair will entertain a motion to approve the request for an increase in enrollment received from the following charter schools for the 2020-2021 school year. Dale R. Fair, Babson Park Elementary, and Navigator Academy of Leadership. What's the pleasure of the board? I need a motion. Mr. Townsend, second. Mr. Wilson. Okay, is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'd like to call for a vote. Oh, whoops, Ms. Miller.
During the work session, I'm sorry, my chair is so low. During the work session, wasn't the discussion, can you remind us the discussion on Navigator? That wasn't going to be increasing per the superintendent's recommendation, if I recall.
Yes, but we changed the number to 106, and I believe that's been reflected in your information.
Okay, I have it. Okay, I see it now.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Mr. Townsend?
Just to explain to anybody watching this now why that was. Navigator had asked for about 86, I think, additional seats above what they were contractually entitled to. I suggested that we not give them those seats because I have not been pleased with what I've heard about their collaborative spirit. I suggested that, you know, if they come back next year with metrics that show they've done a good job of keeping their kids of serving ESE kids, that I as one board member might be inclined to let them have more. But I think it's we don't have a lot of power in the charter world, but it's one way of sending a bit of a message about what we would like to see.
Thank you, Mr. Townsend. Any further comments? Seeing none, I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye and raise your hands.
Oh, yes, aye.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, all those opposed, like sign, the motion carries 7-0. Now it is time for our public hearing. I would like to recess the school board meeting and open the public hearing. At this time, I would like to call the public hearing for April 28th, 2020 to order. The item before us is R31, adoption of the boundary changes for Shelley Boone Middle and Lake Marion Creek Middle Schools. Mrs. Warbington, is there anyone that has submitted comments regarding item R31 for the public hearing today?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Seeing none, we shall proceed. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the boundary changes for Shelley Boone Middle and Lake Marion Creek Middle Schools. What's the pleasure of the board? I need a motion. Sarah, okay. Mrs. Fortney, I need a second. Mrs. Fields. Okay, any discussion? I would simply like to make some comments since these schools are in my area. We have had a while now that Shelley Boone has been overcrowded beyond its capacity for some time now. So in order to begin to relieve the overcrowding, there was a lot of discussion what to do. In reviewing Lake Marion Creek's current enrollment, the staff felt that this would be very helpful in being able to basically put the same amount of students in both schools and levelize the attendance. And so I know that the attendance boundary committee has met and discussed this and had input from many individuals in the community. And I know that emails were sent out as well to receive information. If anybody wants, Mrs. Usher is here. If anybody would like to hear any more information, I know she talked to us in the work session today, and they've done a really wonderful job putting this proposal together to try to help Boone Middle School. Mr. Townsend?
Yeah, I'm totally grateful to the committee. I think they did a great job. I'm really actually commenting because I think we forgot to vote on the McKeel charter stuff. The one before. I think we needed to vote on the ones that were automatic. I don't think we actually voted on them.
We don't vote on those. Those were
Oh,
just for information because
Okay,
they're high
okay.
achieving charter schools.
Okay. Okay. So, okay, good.
It's okay. Okay, going forward, any other discussion on Boone and Lake Marion Creek? Seeing none, I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye and raise your hands. All those opposed, like sign. The motion carries 7-0. At this time, I would like to close the public hearing and reconvene the school board meeting. Next, we come to our superintendent's report. Madam Bird, do you have an update for us today?
I do. Let me do this little thing here. Won't you pass me? Okay, I do have an update. How about now? I'm there. Okay. Just to give a quick update to let them know that we wanted all of the teachers and staff to know that as we move into the budget season for 2021, as we normally do, we always look and hold all vacancies, and we look at all positions that we can hold back. So if there's any evidence that we have to reduce any positions, we reduce positions that do not have a person actually in those positions. Also, I want the teachers to know that I know that we never start the year with a full classroom, so we continue to hire for our teaching force because we never have opened a year where we did not have any vacancies in our teaching staff. The updates from our school side is that we have our Wi-Fi buses. We have 50 of them that are out and about in our neighborhoods, where we have them in apartment complexes. We have them in facilities where they're sitting in our bus loops, where we are offering that service to our community and our students, where they can go and they can actually connect if they were having difficulty connecting, or if they did not have any service in their area. Another thing I wanted to bring everybody up to date is graduation is a hot topic, and our students are completing a survey. It will close on Thursday. The majority of the students, over 75% of them, want to have a traditional graduation, which will have them to do a traditional walk. We have located a venue and we are actually finalizing the plan to provide them with that. It is going to be an outdoor facility so that we can make sure that we abide by the CDC guidelines and we're not putting a lot of people in one area. We are going to make sure we observe social distancing. So I need the public to know that the tickets will be limited, that we give the students, but we want to honor the students' requests. That information will be coming out at the end of this week with an official announcement for our staff as we continue to work on the operational side of everything that we're doing for our students and make sure that they get a graduation for this year. The May 12th school board meeting, we will have a work session at 12:30 and a 5 p.m. board meeting that will be virtually on May 12th. Madam Chair, that concludes my announcements for today.
Thank you, Superintendent Byrd. Next, we have our attorney's report, which will be given today by Mr. Bridges.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have the first item that I have to present is a big one. You will recall that back in the hurricane season of 2017, Polk County was hit by Hurricane Irma. And the district initially contracted with a gentleman named Scott Favre to be our public adjuster to adjust that claim, and subsequently with an appraiser by the name of George Keys of George Keys Claims Consulting as our appraiser to appraise the claim in the appraisal process. Under the terms of those contracts, the public adjuster and the appraiser were to be paid a fee on a contingency basis. Subsequent to that time, a Florida appellate court ruled that a disinterested appraiser could not be paid on a contingency basis. The insurance companies objected to Mr. Key's continuing service, and the school board terminated his contract. Since that time, with the assistance of counsel, the district has pursued its insurance claims through the appraisal process at a great deal of time and expense. Now, on the 6th and 7th of April, the district participated in a mediation conference. It was conducted virtually and involved a mediator in Manhattan and parties from London, Tampa, Bartow, and other remote locations. There were about 30 people in on the mediation. For the district, the superintendent, Mr. Perone, Ms. King, attorneys John Stidham, Wade Stidham, Tina Nicholson, Allison Baker, and myself participated. And while by law that mediation process is confidential and we can't talk about what was said during the mediation, I can tell you that the matter was not resolved, but over the course of 2 weeks of rather grueling and intense negotiations, the mediator has worked with the individual parties and counsel to reach a negotiated settlement. The insurance policy limits were $50 million. A copy of the settlement in its substantially final form is was attached to my memo and is attached to your item for execution if you approve. The amount of the negotiated settlement was $20 million, which is a great big settlement. It would be probably 40 times as large as the largest settlement that we've seen during my time at the school district. And this is one where it's money coming to you and not going out. Now, Mr. Favre and Mr. Keys are objecting to the settlement. They wish to be paid fees, and they object to the amount. I would also point out to you that the value of the settlement, $20 million in the hand, is worth a great deal more than that to the school board in real terms, because if we were to take this through the appraisal process, it would likely take about 2 years. And the estimates to complete that process are between $5 and $10 million. In addition, we would have to pay from any recovery our deductibles. So just by rough calculations, you would have to recover somewhere between $35 and $40 million in appraisal before you would be able to net $20 million. The reason it is so expensive is that we have over 2,000 buildings that have to be individually appraised on 150 different campuses. Our appraiser tells us that it would take 2 to 3 days to present each one of those to the appraiser. The appraisal hearing itself could last a year. But before then, it would involve appraising every single one of those buildings, having the engineers examine them, the civil engineers, the environmental scientists, the construction engineers, to assign value to that. And then we would go through a litigation process with the appraiser in which we would come in and assert that we had a great deal of damage. The insurance companies would come in and assert that we had no damage that wasn't pre-existing or unrelated. And then we would go through that process. It's very similar to an arbitration. Once again, we estimate that it would take at least 2 years to prepare for it. If they insisted in having a single appraisal hearing, it would likely take something along the lines of a year to do that at 2 to 3 days per campus. And the estimated cost would be $5 to $10 million on that. After sitting through the mediation and looking at the reports of our appraiser and reviewing things presented by their appraiser, it is our feeling that the proposed settlement is a very good compromise of a disputed claim between the school board and the insurance companies. It is time sensitive, and they have indicated that if we don't have it approved today, that they have not made a representation that it will be withdrawn. They have told us that if it is not approved, that we are at risk of losing that deal. Now, I want to be very, very plain with you. Once again, there were $50 million in policy limits available. Initially, our public adjuster and our appraiser threw some very big numbers around about what they thought that claim might be worth. And one of the figures that they frequently mentioned was $200 million. We don't know where that came from. The claim has never been adjusted. And to our knowledge, the appraiser did a cursory review of some of our buildings, but has not done a detailed appraisal of any of them. The reason that I mention this to you is that at 7:25, we received an email to public comments. The email address, we have no idea who it's from, but the email address is powell5819@gmail.com. And it reads, Polk schools received $200 million in damages by Hurricane Irma, but the school board is about to settle for just $20 million. There is something wrong with this picture. What about Polk County children and the future of our schools? Please delay this agenda item until you can explain this seemingly horrible decision to taxpayers. And Ms. Worthington has just forwarded a second email that came in at 7:33 to the same end from GORG Williams, G Williams 69187@gmail.com. Reading, we have been hearing our schools received $200 million in damages by Hurricane Irma, but the school board is settling for just $20 million, and our schools will see less than $13 million when fees are paid. This is unfair to Polk County children and the future of our schools. Please delay this agenda item until you can explain this to the taxpayers. And I have with me today Jonathan Stidham, who is one of the attorneys who has represented the district in this matter from the beginning, who can also speak to this. But this is a very interesting figure. The only place that I can figure out that this suggestion of $200 million in damages came from would have been from our adjuster or our appraiser, with whom we are on the outs and in dispute. And I cannot imagine where else that figure could have come from. The difficulty we have is that was a figure that they bandied about, but have never presented substantive evidence to support, either through adjustment or through appraisal. The insurance company initially adjusted this claim at $94,000. That was the the initial assessment of the insurance company as to the value of these damages. When we reviewed the appraisal, it appeared to us that the damages, most of these damages were not catastrophic. Most of there was damage to the building, ironically, in which risk management sits at the district office. Significant damage to the roof that required the roof to be replaced. There has been damage to other roofs. There has been damage to gutters. There has been water damage all over the place. There is significant damage, but not catastrophic damage. When we delved into this, it appeared to myself, and I believe also to our facilities folks, to our chief financial officer and to the superintendent, that the suggestion that there were $200 million in damages was not supportable. I can tell you that the mediation process was a grueling one. I am gratified that we were able to bring in a negotiated settlement of $20 million. The superintendent will recommend it to you. Mr. Perone will recommend it to you. Ms. King will recommend it to you. And I recommend it to you. But that is with the understanding that we have the outstanding claims by Mr. Favre and Mr. Keys that we will have to resolve. We'll have to negotiate an escrow for those, for funds to cover their, to cover the risk there until such time as we have resolved those claims. But it appears from our records that that the claim was not properly adjusted from the get-go. That it is critical that the claim be adjusted as quickly and in time to the storm as possible. That did not happen. Certainly some work was done, and we have documentation showing that the appraiser, our initial appraiser, Mr. Keys, did some work to appraise the facilities, but did not complete a complete appraisal on any building on any campus in our district. And here we are 2.5 years out. Mr. Stidham, am I missing anything salient that we should relay?
I don't believe so, unless there are some questions about this adjuster and this appraiser. I could give the board a long history of why we're in a dispute with them. And I can just tell you a couple of things. As far as Mr. Favre, the public adjuster, I've been on this case now for 1.5 years, and I have been living with it every day, all day. I've talked to Mr. Favre, our public adjuster, who was supposed to be trying to get our claim settled for us one time, and that was about 1.5 years ago, right at maybe the week after I became involved in the case. He and Mr. Keys are friends. They go way back, and they are very plainly working together. I hesitate to say too terribly much, but we haven't heard from Mr. Favre, like I said, in over 1 year. I haven't talked to him in well over that. We believed all along that Mr. Favre, and I actually know for certain, Mr. Favre abandoned his contract. And Mr. Keys, we had to dismiss him. Mr. Favre is the one who recommended Mr. Keys to us. And he wasn't very happy about that. And so when we believed that we had the case settled subject to your approval, the insurance company required us, as is very normal practice, to contact anyone who may have a claim, a lien claim. And that's when we approached these people first about, were they claiming anything, any kind of a fee? Frankly, I thought that Mr. Favre would walk away from it. I knew Mr. Keys wouldn't, because we were already in litigation with them. But instead, we received a very nasty, and we have been now for the last week undergoing assaults, including personal attacks of me and my co-counsel that are completely untrue and came about as a result of things that they have obviously made up. So these people, what they've done is they're big time adjusters. They were handling the government of Puerto Rico's claims at the same time they were supposed to be handling our claims. And we believe that may have been part of the problem, but essentially they didn't complete their contracts, and they are now here not only looking for a handout, but they were hoping, and I suspect that these emails that are anonymous are them, because their actions, which I won't go into detail now, but over the last week prove absolutely that they are trying to drive a wedge or to throw a wrench into the settlement. They weren't at the mediation. They don't know what the other side's argument was. And well, let me just say this much. The insurance company initially adjusted the claim at $94,000. That's all they were going to pay, just as if you had damage to your house in the hurricane and you called your insurance company, they sent out an adjuster. They said $94,000. Over the course of 2 years, they paid a total of $600,000, and that's where we were stuck, 600 and change. And we got $20 million. And so that has to be a settlement under these circumstances, certainly, that I recommend.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to be very clear. This is breaking news, and these emails just came in. Once again, the notion that this is worth hundreds of millions of dollars is one that was floated by our adjuster and by our appraiser. Once again, we had no catastrophic failure of our facilities, and while I don't want to argue against our claim, there was significant damage in this district. After going through this process, it appears to me that a $20 million settlement from the insurance, from our insurance carrier, is a fair settlement that would benefit the school board of Polk County and the citizens of Polk County. It's easy to throw around these numbers. Once again, if we went through the mediation process, assuming that there were actually hundreds of millions of dollars in damage, which once again, our adjuster and our appraiser did not come down and adjust, did not come down and appraise. But assuming that there were, in order to net $20 million from a $50 million insurance policy, or it's a number of policies, but in order to net that after deductibles and after the costs of mediation, you would probably have to have a $40 million award at appraisal in order to net $20 million. It is a great big amount, and it's high stakes. And when the stakes are high and the dollars are this big, it appears that things come out of the woodpile, and that is what we're dealing with. But the suggestion that the claim in the email that we had $200 million in damages by Hurricane Irma is simply not supportable. So I would certainly, if Mr. Stidham or if the superintendent or Mr. Perone wish to comment, they are welcome. But to me, a $20 million settlement on this is a really good day for the school board.
So the chair will entertain a motion to approve the settlement and release by and between the School Board of Polk County, Florida and Westchester Surplus Lines Insurance Company, resolving disputed claims for loss and damage that occurred as a result of Hurricane Irma for a total amount of $20 million, and authorization of the board chair, the superintendent, and council to execute all necessary documents. I need a motion and a second. Do we have one? If so, raise your hand. Mrs. Fields and Mr. Wilson. Okay. Is there any discussion? Sure there will be. Mr. Townsend?
A couple of questions. Do we have what relative size of escrow do you expect to be holding back for this? Can you give me some sort of lower pole and higher pole?
Yes, I will do my best to do that. If the appraiser, let me start with the adjuster. If the adjuster were to receive 100% of his fee against a $50 million award, it would be 10% or $5 million. If the appraiser were to receive his full fee against a $50 million award, it would be 5% or $2.5 million. So that against a potential award of $50 million, that would be the maximum that they would be entitled to. Once again, they seem to be challenging this, number one, attempting to stop it from happening, but also I have the sense that they're looking to assert their fee against a larger amount than what we're actually going to be able to recover against the insurance company. My argument would be that they don't have the right to control, under the public adjuster statute, they don't have the right to control the amount of the settlement. And that if they were to get 100% of their fee against the school board on a $20 million settlement, that would be for Mr. Favre 10% or $2 million, and for Mr. Keys 5% or $1 million. Once again, we are going to contest tooth and nail their right to fees under this, and there may be a negotiated agreement in the end, which would be brought to you for approval. But those are the
three.
I'll tell you, in my best guess is that we're going to end up talking about a percentage against what we actually settle for, rather than the $50 million policy limits, which were, that is purely speculative. I cannot imagine that being a consideration in a court of law.
I mean,
I can go a little bit further than that, Mr. Townsend. I think my best guess, it's way more than a guess. My legal analysis of this is that the appropriate escrow, until we can determine what, if anything, they're owed, would be 10% for Mr. Favre of $20 million and 5% for Mr. Keys. So that would be $3 million in escrow. If I were to lay, I can't tell you that they won't come up with arguments to try to convince the court to hold more, but it's the school board's decision whether to settle the case or not. And because of that, it would seem, I hope that the court will quickly see that and will not allow any more than just $3 million, not that that's a small amount, but to be held up.
What is the mechanism by which they think they're going to get to $50 million? That they're going to, I mean, how does that even get argued on their side? What's their angle in having this settlement killed?
I think that their angle in trying to kill the settlement is that they believe that now they can come in, and if the settlement's dead, that they're going to be able to somehow apply pressure. They have been doing, I have seen some things that in 34 years as a trial lawyer handling major litigation that are as bad or worse than anything I've ever seen litigants do. And so I can't tell you I can't be certain as to what they might do. I know that their lawyers seem to be stretching as hard as they can to come up with some sort of a theory that would allow them to get even more than their percentage of what we decided to settle the case for. I can give you great comfort in that the public adjuster statute, which these gentlemen are bound by, requires them to do some things that, frankly, it doesn't appear that they're doing right now. One is to always hold the insured's interest above their own personal interests. Another one is that the adjuster is forbidden by law from interfering with direct negotiations between the insured and the insurance company about settlement. And so given all that, I do not, my personal legal opinion currently is that they do not have any way to make a claim that they somehow, or that their fees could be based upon anything more than the amount that we settled the claim for. And that's why I believe it's most certainly likely that that'll be the amount of the escrow.
Ms. Johnson, one other point that I would make is that under the public adjuster statute, they're also not entitled to receive a fee for work that they did not do. And I think our going in position is that there was a great deal of work that they did not do. To get into, to delve into theories of recovery against them or any potential legal actions against them at this time. The question for tonight, understanding that there is a challenge and that there is an objection by these gentlemen. Whether you wish to go ahead and proceed to approve a $20 million settlement with the understanding that some amount of that will be placed in escrow pending the outcome of those claims, or whether you do not. And if you don't, there are two possibilities. I'm sure there are more than that, but the immediate possibilities are it could be that the insurance carriers would be willing to leave this offer on the table for some period of time while we attempt to figure all this out. The other is that it could be withdrawn, or we could walk away from it and we could avail ourselves of the appraisal process and take our chances. And once again, if we do that, the process itself is exceedingly expensive, exceedingly time consuming, would probably take at least 2 years to get through to the appraisal hearing point. And at that time, once again, any recovery we made through the appraisal process would be reduced by deductibles and the cost of the process itself. So once again, it appears to us to be a fair resolution of a disputed claim, notwithstanding the the unsupported figure that has been sent. And I want to be very, very clear. You know, we over the past 3 years, Mr. Favre and Mr. Keys have made representations about the value of this claim being in the hundreds of millions. Have never supported it with an appraisal, have never adjusted it, and frankly, to my knowledge, our adjuster has never presented our claim to the insurance companies as he was required to do. He was also involved in representing us in our FEMA claim, and when FEMA denied our claim on procedural reasons, not substantive ones, the major reason they gave was because it had not been presented. The information requested had not been afforded them by our public adjuster. So there's a lot of water under this bridge, and I'm sure that we're going to get to talk about some of that at some point. But
I'm going to support it, Wes.
Thanks.
I'm just trying to. I mean, and just to be clear, I you know, Mr. Stidham has done a lot of work for us. So what's assuming what's the worst case scenario that you guys see right now? Assuming a worst case scenario of a $3 million chunk from those guys. What's the worst case scenario that the Polk County School District is walking away that we can use for our kids?
We will have to pay our attorney's fees out of this, which are contingent fees, and that is 25% of the total.
Okay.
So after 25%, that leaves 15 million on the table. If there's $3 million tied up, that leaves 12 that ought to be available sooner rather than later. Plus, I suspect a significant portion of that additional $3 million that is.
I got you. Okay.
It's being tagged, and I said these emails came out of the blue tonight. I mean, we're aware that Mr. Favre and Mr. Keys have claims. These came out of the blue. Apparently, somebody is out there disseminating or making claims that I would characterize in vulgar fashion were I not live on the air. But
It's okay.
yeah, it just
It's okay, Wes. Let's.
Gotcha.
It's
Okay.
all right.
Okay. So
Can everybody hear me? Next, I have Mrs. Fields.
Okay, so Wes, first of all, I want to congratulate you and the team for doing an amazing job. I think this is the largest settlement we've ever had from a hurricane.
long
damage.
shot.
Okay, and so you guys are to be commended. We're looking at almost 3 years that we've been dealing with this, and you all have been steadfast and you've been unmovable. So congratulations for our kids. My question is, once we do the settlement and the dollars that's left over, can those dollars be used in any form or fashion? Does it have to go back to replace those damage repairs that we had to take from other places to make sure that those obligations were met?
Our policy of insurance does not require that. It is my understanding that these funds would be unrestricted.
And so it would be up to the board to determine where those
Yes, ma'am.
dollars would go. Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
thank you, Mrs. Fields. Mrs. Miller?
I just have a quick question. Who hired these adjusters? I would like to know that.
Well, that is a very good question, and nobody wants to take credit for that. In the aftermath of the storm, it is my understanding that some unnamed person in Tallahassee had made a recommendation or a suggestion, and that got brought back to our district and handed to our risk manager. Frankly, both of these gentlemen came highly recommended. They both had substantial track records of success. There was nothing in their background that would suggest that they would not accomplish the tasks that they were contracting to do. As Mr. Stidham pointed out, I believe it appears that the claims in Puerto Rico may have distracted them and occupied their attention. Those were billion-dollar claims, not multi-million-dollar claims. But they were, I don't know who made the recommendation, but I know that it was sent down to our risk management department, and they brought it forward, did the due diligence to check out the individuals, and that it
And
is.
I don't want to, I'm
yeah,
sorry, Wes, that we keep dragging you through this. I just, in future claims that I'm sure we'll have, I think we need to vet who these people are and not take anonymous phone calls from Tallahassee with names.
Well, I agree.
Instead
And
of just describe, seems like people with a reputation of, maybe it's not so grand. So I'm concerned as a taxpayer that we allowed these to get through, but I appreciate your work to.
well, and I will tell you, Mrs. Miller, having gone through this process, no one in the district has ever been through this process before. And having gone through it this time, having arrived at what I believe is a very good result, but with the scars on my back to show for it, there have been some lessons learned. And first lesson in my book is, if we ever have a significant emergency claim again along these lines, and we will at some point. We live in Florida, and hurricanes sweep across this state with some frequency. But when that happens, I will not advise anyone to retain the services of a public adjuster for the purpose of adjusting the claim. I believe it is better shepherded by an attorney. And when and if that time comes, we'll bring you that recommendation directly.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you,
Mrs. Miller? Anyone else? Mr. Wilson?
Yes, Mr. Bridges, you mentioned that our FEMA claims were denied.
Yes, sir.
I mean, is there a chance we may still be able to claim something from FEMA?
It is possible. That process is not over. The claims were denied, as I mentioned, procedurally, and FEMA specifically referenced the lack of cooperation or input rather from our adjuster. We retained counsel and went and had that administrative denial overturned. We've had some success with FEMA, but what remains of those claims, you know, if there's anything of significance, we will certainly bring to you. But there's no doubt in my mind that the delays by our representatives resulted in that procedural denial, and our chances would have been much better had they been timely submitted by our public adjuster.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Stidham, have I covered that adequately?
I believe so, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
I've lost everybody. Can anybody hear?
You have your
Okay.
hand up?
Yeah, I have my hand up. Good. Just to dovetail on Ms. Miller's question, because I would have been on the board at that time. Was that hire brought to the board?
Yes.
The hire? It was?
Yes.
I don't remember a discussion.
Ms. Johnson, let me, before I will check and make sure, but I believe that it was.
It's fine. I want to own
Yeah,
responsibility.
it was a professional services contract, and I believe that all of this was brought to the board, but I will make sure.
All right, man. I think it's a good illustration for the reasons why we need to have these kinds of discussions. You know, it's this in some ways relates to some of the disaster related things we're dealing with now. I think the more we're rushed, the more we don't have the time to vet through these things, the more we're likely to stumble on this. So that's all I'll have to say on this. I'm ready to vote when anybody else is.
Thank you, Mr. Townsend. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye and raise your hand. Thank you. And are those opposed, nay, like sign? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much, Mr. Bridges.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. This was a big one, and I endeavor to do things coolly and professionally, and to avoid making things personal. This one has been a challenge, but I think we've done a very good job of maintaining professionalism as we have gone through it, and presenting a cold and calculated recommendation to the school board. One other thing that Brett Butler asked me this afternoon to request authority to advertise a public hearing on the Code of Student Conduct that he presented to you at the work session this afternoon at the June 2020 board meeting. So if you would be so kind as to give me a vote to do that, I will take care of it.
Do I have a motion? Mr. Townsend, second. Mr. Wilson. So the motion is to approve Mr. Bridges to notice a, can you read it again? Notice a public meeting
for the adoption of changes to the Code of Student Conduct.
Code of Student Conduct. Thank you so much. Okay, so all those in favor, please signify by saying aye and raise your hand. Aye, everybody. And those opposed, nay. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you, sir. The next item on our agenda is our auditor's report. However, there was not going to be an auditor's report today, but there will be one in May. Now we have our board member reports. Mr. Townsend, would you like to start?
Sure, and I may be a little faster than I thought. We've talked about a lot of what I wanted to talk about, but I do want to show. I'm going to try to share my screen now. I don't know if other folks have to help me do this or not, but let me do that. All right. Do you guys see? You guys see my pie chart? Can you see
Yes.
that? Okay. This relates to what I was discussing after the vote to ratify the deal with EEA, and it also dovetails with what the superintendent was saying. On my little town hall last night, had a couple of people asking me why, when we're heading into an almost certainly a bad budget period, why are we doing virtual job fairs? And I think my answer to that is we should absolutely assume that we're going to get treated like the vital public infrastructure that we are. I think it's important that we, as both the superintendent as an operational leader, and we the board as elected leaders, set that expectation publicly and with our state and federal representatives. What I want to show you here is why keeping the full human capacity of the Polk school district is not an economic problem at all. It's a political one entirely. The CARES Act alone has already committed $500 billion in direct federal spending to support the value of the stock market and various important businesses like airlines. That's been leveraged with another $4 trillion from the Federal Reserve, which has the authority and the ability to do the same sorts of things for state and local governments, municipal governments. It's just at this point choosing not to. I want to show you this little orange triangle here. That is all spending at the state and local level on education for a year. The entire country, every state, every locality spends about $800 billion to run schools. Obviously, we're not going to need every dime of every school replaced, but it just shows you how little it is compared to what's already been committed to support, frankly, private wealth. That's a political choice. The federal government right now is starting to think about what the fourth stage of the CARES Act is, or the response is going to be. And the Senate Majority Leader has said that states should declare bankruptcy and get rid of their pensions instead of funding the vital services like police and fire and education, of course. I think we as a board need to reject that. I would encourage us. I mean, I would hope that we would write a unified letter to our federal delegation saying that we expect support. And I'm willing to ask about that formally at the next meeting if it doesn't happen before then. But I think this pie chart creates the correct economic expectation for people, and it's very important for us to not start negotiating with ourselves about what services we're going to cut. I mean, I've heard people talk about we could cut transportation if we were to stay in a distance learning mode. I want everybody to understand. I'm going to vote against any budget that comes to me that cuts human capacity. That cuts anybody's job. It cuts the stuff that we have to do to serve our kids. Now, the state, if there's not a federal bailout, probably won't have enough money to pay for everything that it's committed to. And they have the power through the 7069 lawsuit to impose cuts. And I as one board member, fully intend to make them own the political cost of that. They are going to make those cuts over me. They have the authority to do it. They went to court to assert that authority. I hope they will see it in their interest as well as ours to push our federal government very, very hard to give a very serious, probably multi-year sustenance package for vital local services, because we've been in an economy in Florida since March 1st, roughly. That's just going on 2 months now, which is not quite 20% of the year, where the economy is probably operating at what, 60%, 50%, maybe. I don't know where. They're afraid to announce what the projections are. But the economy is going to remain impaired until Disney can open and tourism can come back fully. The state is not going to be producing the kind of revenue that it was, and there is going to be at some point a very, very, very big hole. I've heard people talking about 20 to 25%. I think that's just a logical assumption based on how long this goes on. Filling that hole is going to be a political decision, not an economic one. Again, it is easy for the federal government to decide to fund this and do it. They're already doing it at a massive level for private wealth. They need to do it for public infrastructure as well. And that's the political message that I wanted to share with my fellow board members, because we are political leaders. We are not the highest paid volunteers in the Polk County school system. We are political leaders who should take political positions and demand that the human capacity of our service be sustained. So that's part one. I just wanted to show you the scale of this. Also, you see this little green wedge here? That is all spending for a year. All spending for a year on law enforcement, on state and local law enforcement, including prisons. It's roughly $200 billion a year. For $1 trillion per year, the federal government and Federal Reserve could support, without any cut, every single school in America and every single law enforcement agency and prison. Again, it is a political decision, and we need to think of ourselves right now as political leaders above all else, because that is where we're going to be the most effective in protecting and supporting our people, and more importantly, providing the service that our kids and our communities are going to need. They've come through a very traumatic time. They're going to need help, and we cannot allow politics to take away the ability to provide that help. So that's part one. A couple of things that came up. One of the things I've said from the beginning when this started is I wanted the organization and our teachers and staff and our parents and kids to think of the education system now as a resource, not an authority, not a thing that's punishing them, that's dictating to them what needs to be done. And I think we've done a really good job of communicating that that ethic. I really give the superintendent a lot of credit for that. I think Michelle Townley has been great about that. John, I think I'm very pleased with that. I think we have struck the right chord almost from the beginning, almost without exception. I think the grade policy, and I know this ties into the state, but the grade policy that had teachers give kids what they got in the third quarter for the fourth quarter if the fourth quarter wasn't better, somehow the way that got communicated or the way it's been discussed, there are some teachers who think they're being required to be dishonest in how they make those grades. What I understand this to be is really just that there's no consequence for the fourth quarter, which I support completely. I want to make it clear as best we can to our teachers that they should reward kids who have done well and not punish the ones who haven't. But I also don't want them to lie about the grades they're giving them. I think there's a lot of ways to finesse this that are honest. When I talk to people about it, they generally are fine with my framing of it that way. It just might be worth another round of communication, or some way of communicating that the fourth quarter grades, you know, it's we're going to reward you for what you got, not punish you for what you didn't. So that's a thing to think about. I'm not really sure how that's going to relate with the state exactly. And then the other thing I want to talk about, and you know, I'm hearing a lot of sort of catch-22 frustration situations around teacher certification and renewals and things where there's all these different categories, and HR knows all about this. You know, I've used the phrase before, addiction to compliance, and I think a lot of districts, ourselves included to some degree, although I think we're getting better about this. When the state gives us space by not asserting a thing, sometimes it feels like we may not be as assertive as we can be. I would really like us to come up with a unilateral policy of extension or mercy or whatever on some of these sort of certification requirement issues, and they're so specific and so unique to various people that it's hard for me to characterize them individually. But maybe at our next meeting, if there could be some discussion of this, I'm hopeful within the next 2 weeks there'll be some more guidance and input from DOE. Jacob Oliva, when I was on the call about a week and a half ago, certainly seemed to indicate that mercy and waiver and, you know, a lack of auditing was going to be the state's approach. And I mean, I think both for grades and for our certification stuff with teachers, I'd like to have us discuss that a bit at the next meeting and see what we can do to be helpful to people in that as a district. And I think that may actually, yeah, I think that takes care of what I needed to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Townsend. Ms. Fortney?
Thank you. I've had a chance to interact with people. I have no idea. I just know they're great teachers. They have also shared with me their frustration about the grading policy that rolled out and the interpretation, school to school certification issues, tests that they were scheduled to take. And the main thing that people have reached out to me about really is the missing of the kids and how they know their kids are suffering. And, you know, I just want to thank everybody on the school, in the school side of it, for rolling this out. I just couldn't be more proud. And of course to the staff and superintendent, of course, but it just goes to show why pre-K public schools just do it better. Like, all the time. We do more socially and emotionally that people have no idea, feeding kids what we do. I want to kind of piggyback on Mr. Townsend because I want to push that envelope a little further. I would suggest that we also start to advocate for no test and punish for 20 and 21 school year. If you look back at history, the hurricanes of 04, you follow those kids all the way up, they suffered immensely because of their lost interaction time with with teachers. And right about then, I do believe we went from the Florida, well, I should call it what it is, FCAT. I was going to call it my little own name, but I won't, to the FSA. And now we're going from the present standards to a new set of standards, which means more work for teachers and more rewriting lesson plans, etc. I will not vote for anything that is not, that requires balancing the budget on the backs of our public education system. That's our teachers, students, bus drivers, the whole 9 yards. If that means a federal bailout, then that's what we need. There was an article in the Ledger today, don't sacrifice education for Florida's kids. If you haven't looked at it, you might want to read it. I want to thank all of our frontline workers. A lot of them are our parents who are trying to teach distance learning and then showing up and going to ER rooms as nurses and doctors, etc. You're doing a fantastic job. And I want to end on something very positive and sad. Dear Miss Ekman, as I retire, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Polk County School Board, my principals, assistant principals, coaches, teachers, paraprofessionals, special area teachers, PEA members, and especially my students who have filled this journey with love, compassion, and challenges. I began teaching in 1982 with 32 first graders in a hallway because the school was so overcrowded. I've earned the BS in early childhood education, a BS in elementary education, endorsements in gifted education and ESOL, certificates in middle school integrated curriculum, and journalism. I have taught almost every grade level in every kind of facility, including jails. I have learned a great deal during these 4 decades about myself and my students and about the education system. Above all things, a teacher must be willing and able to teach the child, to see the child, not just the sum of all her nature and nurture, but to see what lies beyond her present self to successfully shape her in preparation of her future. The first 20 years of my career, we did teach children. We had the authority and the autonomy to begin where the child was academically, socially, and emotionally, and fill the gaps the child lacked and allow the child to reach as far above and beyond as she was capable. The last 20 years of my career, there has been a shift in the focus of education from child-centered to test-based curriculum. We're not allowed to teach a child where she was. We had to teach a child where the state said she should be. And if something were not on the test, we could not teach it. The last 9 weeks of my career as a public school teacher, things have shifted again from test-based to distance learning, where a child is dealt with one on an individual basis and her skills or lack thereof has to be accommodated and acknowledged before the true learning can commence. I believe that these children, removed from the crushing shackles of micromanaged curriculums, will become life learners. And so I retire from my public school teaching career with a sense of hope and promise that the next generation will realize that the only true way to ensure that no child is left behind is to begin teaching one another where they are and help them travel to where they can be. With faith, Evelyn Rainey. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Fortney. Ms. Reynolds?
Hello.
Hello.
I just want to say thank you to all of our staff and students and families that have worked so hard to make this transition possible. It was an incredible lift, and our teachers, as always, rose to the occasion and did everything they could for our students. Like many of you have said, I've gotten numerous phone calls and emails from teachers, and the thing that they miss the most is being able to see their kids and hug their kiddos. And that is the kind of passion that makes education exactly what it should be. A couple of specific shout outs for this time. As the liaison for the academies, we've had quite a few virtual meetings in the past few months, a lot dealing with how we market our academies and how we can translate some of the things that go on in the academies to distance learning. Obviously, not being able to do hands-on projects makes it very difficult for some of our CTE courses because they are very hands-on courses. So they've been working on different ways that they can get guest speakers and things like that involved so that the students still have access to business partners and opportunities like that when they can't necessarily be hands-on. So there will be a survey going out to our Academy's advisory board, and we've also will be sharing that with our chambers to share with their business partners for businesses that are interested in being guest speakers for some of our academies and being thinking partners, particularly while they can't necessarily be in front of them. Which is a really cool way to be able to still incorporate our business community into our academies, which is a huge part of what academies should be. So that'll be coming out in the next week or so. Additionally, the Winter Haven Chamber has been doing weekly coffee and conversation on Friday mornings. I have to say it's probably one of the highlights of my week because I get to see so many people. But it's been great to be able to not only see what else is happening in the city, but also to be able to update the city of Winter Haven and its business partners on what's happening in our schools. That's always the first question on the call is what's going on in the education world, which is pretty cool for a chamber. But so getting to update them on some of the different things we're doing has been great. There's also been several opportunities to collaborate. I presented with Steve Warner at the Leadership Winter Haven's Education Day. It was on all of our calendars originally to attend in person for April 15th, but they did an hour Zoom call and we were able to give some updates as to what's happening in the community. And one of the things that came out of that is at that time we were looking for, we have a satellite campus satellite feeding site at our pet tutoring center, which was not able to be staffed. And the city of Winter Haven was able to step up and help staff that using some of their city employees, which was a great help to be able to continue serving those kids in that community. So I want to say a big thank you to the city of Winter Haven for loaning us some extra hands so that we can continue feeding our kids. And I think that is all I have for my report. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ms. Reynolds. Ms. Fields?
Okay, I just have a couple of things, and my iPad battery is getting low, so hopefully it won't die on me before the meeting is done. I wanted to congratulate Superintendent Byrd for being featured in the Lakelander. I don't know how many of y'all have seen the article that was done on some of the leaders in the community, and she was one of them, and it was an amazing article. So if you all have an opportunity, you need to read it. I also wanted to commend her on the recent video that she did to the teachers. I'm sure that you all got a chance to see that. And it was a very upbeat message. And I got a lot of positive feedback from the teachers and from the community, just saying how wonderful it was to have a superintendent like Superintendent Byrd that's really working hand in hand with our teachers and with our non-related employees and with our district in its entirety. So I wanted to commend her on that. And then basically reiterating what everybody else has said about everybody doing what they needed to do during this challenging period. And I want to especially thank the parents and the teachers and the students for doing their very best with distant learning. We know that that's very stressful, along with a lot of other issues, a lot of medical issues that some of the parents are dealing with, as Ms. Fortney referenced in her report. And at the end of the day, hopefully we'll all understand that we need to have grace and mercy. And I believe that Ms. Townley has said that in one of her videos. And I know that Ms. Byrd has been saying that continuously. So hats off to everybody for that effort. I also wanted to commend whoever came up with the idea with the Wi-Fi buses. I think that's just amazing that we're going out to the community and meeting them where they are and providing them with the resources that they need so that they can get access to the internet to ensure that their kids get their education done as best they can. And then I want to thank the staff for today, for the meeting. That was a rough start, but we made it through. And I want them to be encouraged and know that next time, I'm sure that it would be 100% better. But I think they did a great job, a great experience. And I want to thank the superintendent for her weekly updates and making sure that we are being informed. And I don't know if that might be something that we can share on the website or on our Facebook page. I think some of the items have been, but maybe that could be another way to communicate to the public on some of the things that's going on behind the scene. And then lastly, I want to thank the superintendent and her team for listening to the concerns of our employees. We've had conversations for years about payroll and getting paid more than once a month, and they have made that happen. So congratulations to them for doing that. I also want to commend them for working on the health plan. We've been dealing with that issue for years, and to see light at the end of the tunnel is very reassuring. And that has taken a lot of effort on the staff part and the employees part as well. And the voluntary sick leave donation policy just came to us a few months ago, and they've already jumped on it, and they are trying to come up with a resolution. So overall, I think well done. And I'm very proud to be a part of the Polk County Public Schools. And that ends my report.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Mr. Wilson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll be brief. I just don't know how to say thank you enough. I just don't know. I don't have the words to say thank you enough to the superintendent, her staff, our teachers, our paras, our cafeteria workers, our bus drivers, all the employees of the school district. It's just amazing to me how people are willing to pull together in difficult times and reach out and help each other. And I should say to our students and our parents as well, it's just an amazing, incredible thing. And I just don't know how, I don't know how to say thank you enough, but that's what I'd like to say. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mrs. Miller?
Hi, thank you. I'll try to be brief as well. My Micah only tried to come in one time the last 9 hours, so we did pretty good. I don't know if y'all caught that. But I do want to steal Sarah Fortney's line that public schools just do it better. I have never seen the community really get around our public schools like they currently have, and it's because our teachers showed up, and it wasn't directed and it's scripted. It was to show up for their kids, and I think that we've seen a lot of that, and we've always believed that. But for the longest time, the teachers became the enemy. And that's how legislation was written, that there was a problem with them and we have to mandate everything they're doing or they wouldn't do a good job. And we've really seen that's not true. So I think that's a message that I'm happy out of this dark cloud. That was the silver lining. But I also want to mention the students that struggle when school's in session are homeless students, low socioeconomic, are significantly disabled students who cannot attend to a computer, who have to have hand-over-hand instruction. These students are the ones that are continually, even with teachers doing the best they can in these conditions to provide safe instruction. If students need therapeutic instruction, we cannot provide that right now. So the gaps happening, is going to be something that we have to make up next year and continue over the summer when they allow us, if they allow us to go back to do any kind of summer learning. But I want to mention those students. We've made connections with most of our students. I was very happy to hear the report from the superintendent about how many students we've actually connected to. But students being able to do work consistently and turn it in, you will see the divide. You will see the privilege when we go to this distant learning. So I don't want to forget those students that, multi kids in one house, parents working, grandparents watching during the day. Our teachers have kids they're trying to learn. Our students with disabilities who need a hand-over-hand para to make a selection on an iPad. Those are the kids that, at this time is the most difficult. And I know that our teachers are trying to meet their needs, but I think we need to remember those kids in these times. But I do appreciate what everything that's being done and what the staff has done. Watching the parades of teachers go visit students, none of that's required. I think it's really showing the community where our heart is, and it's with our kids. So I look forward to meeting more often because 8-hour meetings is probably not, the best. So I appreciate the decision of the board to increase our meetings. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Now, I do have a few comments as well. During the press conference on March 13, Superintendent Byrd and I made the announcements to close Polk County Public Schools for what we thought was going to be 2 weeks. I wanted to go ahead with our regularly scheduled board meeting on March 17th. So I polled the board, and thankfully we were able to meet according to the schedule. The following week, the governor closed schools until May 1st. Within several days, our district team reached out to teachers and administrators throughout our county to figure out how to distance learn with kids from elementary to high school. There was no policy, no roadmap, no instructions on how to teach students during a safe at home pandemic. I witnessed teachers, paras, custodians, cafeteria workers, bus drivers, maintenance personnel, administrators, district staff, and volunteers work together to take care of our kids. From daily car line food distribution to handing out iPads, we reinvented our education system within about 10 days. Using Microsoft Teams and Google Classroom to Zoom and Class Dojo, our teachers have reached out to our students and have done an incredible job of online learning. Our counselors have continued to encourage our students to keep going and be the very best that they can be. Our transportation folks have announced that they have equipped 50 school buses with Wi-Fi that is being staged throughout Polk County to provide internet access to our students. Our students have been so resilient. They have adapted to this ever-changing environment using a wide variety of learning platforms. Our students continue to amaze me with their ability to persevere and continue learning. They are all at different places in this educational journey, yet they persevere. Families have taken on new roles to help support their students. Kudos to our students and families for your tenacity. Along the way, our district has been recognized by the Florida School Board Association for being ahead of the curve with our executive policy 0132, which is within our bylaws, which was adopted on November of 2013. This policy delegates authority to the superintendent for an array of duties in emergency situations. Many school districts around our state have now adopted something similar after reviewing our policy. The list goes on and on. We are becoming a kinder, gentler world focused on each other and reaching out to those who need our help, both in our neighborhoods and in our communities. I am so incredibly proud to be a part of our Polk County Public Schools family. Thus, I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to all of our staff for the role that each of you have played in taking care of our students during this unprecedented time. You are amazing. You might ask, what's next? Going forward, Superintendent Byrd and her staff are diligently working on recognizing the senior class of 2020, summer learning initiatives for students, continued food distribution, and how to proceed with student education in the fall. As we receive guidance from the state, Superintendent Byrd will be communicating with everyone. Please continue to visit our website for up-to-date information at polkschoolsfl.com. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank our leader, Mrs. Jackie Bird, our superintendent of schools, for her incredible leadership, her constant going forward, her constantly looking at options and things that we can do to make learning better for our students. And to all the staff who have been working while some of us have been off COVID-19ing at home and at our businesses, our cabinet and staff and administrators in our schools have been there every single day, taking care of kids. And as we all know, leadership starts at the top. And therefore, Mrs. Bird, I thank you and your husband for the sacrifices that you all have made to make sure all of our kids are being taken care of. And that concludes my report. The next item on our agenda is public comments addressing items not on the regular agenda. Mrs. Warbington, is there anyone that has submitted comments regarding items that were not on our agenda today? If so, if you'd like to go ahead and start reading those.
Yes, ma'am. Our first comment comes from Mrs. Michelle Matus. The subject is distance learning, not working better, face-to-face online classes. Dear teachers and members of the School Board of Polk County, this coronavirus pandemic is extremely hard on everyone. I want to bring to your attention that it has been very hard on parents who work from home and also have to give classes or help their children with what they don't understand. Plus print out material and or send back assignments and or projects to each teacher. This is my case. I have a teen in special education with many classes and another child in middle school. I have a full-time online job, which many times requires a more than 8-hour day of work. I do not agree with this new way of each teacher assigning videos or up to 23 screens to read and later 25 questions to answer in one day's classwork without guidance. I have to interrupt my work to help them both. It results in longer hours to comply and submit all the assignments for the day. I feel that the students will be better served if each teacher could give their class at the time scheduled online. Online classes can help the students receive the necessary skills to understand and clarify doubts. Thankful for your help.
Thank you, Ms. Matos.
The next comment comes from Rick Battaglia. He says, good morning. Since there's no school, any chance you could turn off the alarm bells at Philip O'Brien Elementary that occur every morning? Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Pataglia.
Our next comment comes from Mark Lewis, 500 Avenue A Southwest, Winter Haven, Florida, 33880. I'm extremely disappointed in how the pandemic has been handled as follows. Number one, Ms. Fortney and Mr. Townsend have been the only board members that have shown concern for employees and students during this difficult time. The lack of feedback from other board members is disgusting. It is also disgusting that no meetings have been held during this emergency. Number two, the comments posted on the district's Facebook page have often been curt and downright rude. The page posts propaganda and pictures showing no social distancing. Post helpful information instead of just post with the Love Polk Schools hashtag. Number three, students are receiving a ridiculous amount of work from their teachers through distance learning. Also, one platform should be used instead of multiple passwords, etc. Number four, what is the district going to do to protect employees and students? Thin masks from t-shirt material show that the administration does not care about employee or student health. Number five, the district needs to come up with a plan now for distance learning for at least some students next year because it will not be safe for students to return in the fall. Number 6, why did HR publish an illegal form asking employees to illegally disclose disabilities in violation of federal law? Number 7, Ms. Bird needs to stop passing the buck and needs to learn how to make decisions and to do something besides videos and posting pictures to earn her overinflated salary.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Our next comment comes from Alyssa P. I apologize, I don't have a last name. Will children need to complete work packets that were given out 2 weeks ago, even though the rest of the year is canceled and everyone is moving forward to the next grade?
Thank you, Alyssa.
Our next comment comes from Anita Carson. She indicates the following are questions she has for the board members, but she would also like them included in the public comments. Anita Carson, Davenport, Florida. We have a literal national state of emergency and schools are at the forefront and impact everyone in some way. I am glad you are meeting now, and I hope that the board votes to meet weekly or at least twice monthly going forward to address concerns and to plan for the coming year. My questions for the Polk County School Board members are as follows. Number 1, how are we going to honor our graduating seniors in a way that is safe for the students, staff, and families? I know some board members have expressed wanting to make sure our seniors are honored. What is the board wanting to do on a county-wide basis? Number 2, what contingency plans are being put in place going into the next school year? If the virus is still a major issue or has a resurgence in the fall, we should already have plans in place for more equitable distance learning. The first round of distance learning took everyone by surprise. The second shouldn't. We require teachers to have backup plans in case of absences, failed technology, etc. We need our district staff and board to have contingency plans going forward. For example, what happens if A, we are open the 2020-2021 school year with buildings closed? B, we are facing a multitude of devices that were borrowed by families being lost or damaged. C, we have immune-compromised students and staff that cannot or do not feel safe to return in August. Her third comment, how can the school board and superintendent's offices best push state officials for flexibility within our budget? The school board and superintendent, along with our unions, should not have to deal with money allocated to different pots from the state. Let local boards and superintendents prioritize staffing over implementing new programs, professional development, or other unfunded mandates. Let us skip things that are further down the priority list for funding and do away with compliance waste. Number 4, can the Polk School Board and Superintendent's Office join with other districts and push to cancel testing next year as well? With this year's testing gone, we will not have a comparative score for next year to be measured against. Also, math and language arts are both moving to the new BEST standards, and those content areas and teachers will need time to adjust to new standards. We will need more instructional time next year to help with remediation and filling gaps caused by distance learning this year. Canceling testing could also help loosen the tight funding we will likely face going forward and help diminish possible funding cuts at the state level. These questions need answers. Again, I hope that the board is planning to meet more regularly to hear from Polk County residents to address major concerns and to plan for the coming year. There are a multitude of contingencies that are needed in this uncertain time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Carson.
Our next comment comes from Larry Milhorn. He's our president for the AFSCME union, and it's in regards to job security. I would like to know what the district is planning for employees' jobs if the state cuts the budget. I'm getting a lot of questions on this. We are shorthanded in every department now, and people need to be assured they will still have a job at their wages as is.
Thank you, Mr. Milhorn.
Our next comment is from Jennifer Huslin. Her address is 3206 Ogden Drive, Mulberry, Florida. She asked, will the required school days extend past May 28th?
Thank you, Ms. Huslin.
Our next comment comes from Darren Wenhold, 3205 Carlton Circle East, Lakeland. Dear Polk County School Board, parents and the general public was invited to submit comments. Oh, I'm sorry. That's just his notification. In an email with the Assistant Superintendent of ESE, Kimberly Steinke, over Polk County, she stated it's possible there might only be virtual distance learning for ESY. I want to ask that you please do not consider that. ESY, extended school year, is not until June, and it's quickly being proven that ESE children do not learn well, many not at all, in virtual learning environments. In fact, it seems not a week goes by that there isn't a new report that comes out that details the fact that mainstream Gen Ed students are struggling with this distance learning format. Most ESE children either cannot or do not attend to screens. They cannot listen on a phone or tablet. Virtual learning is essentially useless to them. Additionally, most of these students require therapy services such as PT, OT, and speech. These services have already been taken away from them since March, so it will amount to 5 months of no therapy services for students that desperately need it. Private therapy clinics are closed with no date to reopen being announced by clinics. This is causing these children severe regression, and in many cases, it's causing actual physical pain to worsen. As I'm sure most of you know, it's finally being documented on the news on a regular basis that students are not adapting well to distance learning. Fox News, CNBC, CNN, ABC, as well as at least 3 other news radio outlets, as well as talk shows on radio, have ran reports and had interviews with leaders in the ESE communities nationwide and reported how ESE children are failing and are falling much farther behind and regressing at a much higher rate than mainstream students. Do not have virtual ESY for ESE, please. These children have been failed enough as it is by this new system that seems to only worry about the overall majority instead of every student. And Mr. Wenhold has also sent 2 additional news clips to the box, indicating that the president has asked for schools to be reopened.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wenhold.
Our next comment comes from Kat Nickel, 1340 East Boulevard Street, Bartow. In the midst of this unprecedented crisis, as both a mother and a teacher, I would argue that one thing has become crystal clear. Polk teachers are an exceptional group of caring professionals who are quite good at a very difficult job, even when the profession gets a rewrite at the last minute. Every parent I have talked to, the parents of my students and the parents of my children's friends, has heartily agreed that teachers are underappreciated. Please keep this in mind as you start to set policies or evaluate old policies for the upcoming year. We have all gone through at least 4 years of education and training for our careers. We all complete professional development throughout every year, constantly learning and growing in our profession. Many Polk teachers have a master's degree or higher, meaning further education and training. We have earned a much higher level of autonomy than we are currently given. I do not need a map to tell me how and what to teach. I have a degree and years of experience that help me do that. We have long put up with micromanaging and doubts from people who have not been in a classroom for years, if ever, in the form of administration, both at the site level and within the district. I'm not sure how many actually got a real dose on the day of the rally and tally, but I am quite sure it was not nearly enough. I challenge each and every principal, AP, dean, district staff member, associate superintendent, assistant superintendent, and the superintendent herself, anyone who makes a decision that directly impacts the running of a classroom, to teach one class a month. This will keep you all in better understanding of what the profession really entails. I know that much of the high stakes testing and other pieces are out of your hands, but we are a large county with the numbers to make waves. The rally and tally should not have been divisive. It should have brought us all together. We could have had 12,000 plus educational professionals on those buses backed by the families of over 100,000 students. We could have been the rally. Remember that the next time your teachers are fighting for funding to improve our system, we are stronger together. Another point made crystal clear in the wake of this pandemic. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Nichol.
Our next comment comes from Laura Sawyer, 1000 Carlton Arms Drive, Lakeland, Florida. Number one, I would like to hear what each board member thinks should be done for next school year, since only 2 board members have expressed any thoughts on school closures during the pandemic. Number 2, meetings need to be held more often during the pandemic so that the public can be heard. Why are there only 2 members that seem to support this? Number 3, what does each board member plan to do to protect students and staff? My child's school often doesn't even have hand soap. Number 4, what will you do for students and employees that are not comfortable returning to school due to health concerns and underlying conditions? Number 5, are all employees being paid in full even if they are currently unable to work due to health concerns, underlying conditions, helping their children with distance learning, etc.?
Thank you, Ms. Sawyer.
Our next comment comes from Demetrius Thomas, and it's in regards to termination of Demetri Thomas McLaughlin Middle School. Members of the school board, I am writing because, like you, I want to see the scholars in our schools succeed, and I've seen firsthand the powerful impact education can have on student success. My name is Demetrius Thomas. I taught pre-algebra this year at McLaughlin Middle School. This was my first year teaching in Polk County. I previously taught at Cocoa High School in Cocoa, Florida. I drove back and forth every day from Cocoa Beach to Lake Wales because I wanted to be a part of something special. What attracted to me to Polk County was the dedication of your leadership to student success. My purpose in life is to educate and motivate our youth. Today, that was taken away from me when my principal, Deborah Wright, informed me that I was being terminated from my position. When I asked the reason, she said that I was on a probationary contract and that I can be terminated at any time for any reason. All I'm asking is, what's the reason? I did everything that was asked of me. Like any human, I made a few mistakes. Nevertheless, I put the safety of my scholars first, and I made it my priority to help them reach their full potential. The highlight of this school year for me was seeing scholars that had little desire for math really give it all, their all and persevere. When I sat down with Superintendent Byrd, I promised her that I was going to give 110% every day, and that's exactly what I did. Members of the board, please allow due process. Please research this incident before you make your decision. We're going through a pandemic. My wife and I just had a baby, and I really need to be able to support them. I would love to have a phone conference with the board and the superintendent. Thank you for considering.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Ms. Thomas, I'm not sure.
Our next comment is from Stephanie Yoakum, President of the Polk Education Association, 730 East Davidson Street, Bartow, Florida. Good evening. On behalf of the PEA Management Board, the PEA bargaining team, and everyone PEA represents, I want to put the following issues and questions into the public record for our school board and district staff to discuss and then negotiate with PEA and AFSCME as we begin to plan for what school will look like in the fall. Some of these issues directly impact working conditions and health and safety of our employees, which means formal MOU agreements would need to be in place before we come back in any capacity in August. Issues that need to be resolved prior to next year in no particular order. The quality of the thermometers in the schools is suspect at best. We will need hospital grade if we are temperature checking. Policy on temperature needed to send a child home needs to be revised. When a student is found to be ill, temp or no temp, they need to be taken from classroom. Currently, in many cases, they remain or are sent back to the classroom until family arrives. Updated contact numbers for families, families answering a call from the school, and long delays in picking up students is a problem. Children being sent to school sick is an issue. Would bus drivers and attendants have the right to refuse transport if a student looks or acts ill? Would school-based staff have the right to have a student report to the school nurse if a student looks or acts ill? If so, would their decision be backed up or would they be reprimanded? Personal protective equipment must be on campus for every staff member prior to opening, especially for special needs centers, contained classrooms, and medical needs classrooms. You cannot wait until cases appear to order. Attendance policies of students need to be reviewed. If a student might be ill, we need to not have any policies that might make them hesitant to stay home. Attendance policies for staff need to be reviewed. Currently, staff that run out of paid sick time are given, at best, a policy letter of concern, and at worst are issued discipline with suspension or fired. While sick leave abuse can still occur in times of pandemic, policies that urge sick staff to come in despite feeling ill or taking one for the team to come in while sick is a recipe for disaster. An advanced plan in case the pandemic resurges in the fall so that we can close rapidly as appropriate. Older staff are more vulnerable to this virus. What provision will be made if they have to stay home to self-quarantine due to exposure or fear of exposure if there is resurgence? They should not be made to feel less worthy or feel as if they are being squeezed out. There are already those that feel younger staff is much preferred over senior teachers and support staff. Release information regarding the next school year's design as soon as possible. Rumors and fear make it worse. Staff needs time to prepare, as do parents and students. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yocum.
And the final comment this evening is from Brandon Lane. I don't have an address. I appreciate a lot of the good news that was discussed at the work session today. The health plan is on the mend, payroll frequency options are moving forward. Those are great things that are on our horizon because of collaborative efforts among many. To watch the old guard of the board defend the silencing of the public is shameful. The old guard doesn't engage in social media. Enough is enough. Timeliness isn't just important, it's essential, Madam Chair. It's time for a new generation of leadership because the last 20 minutes of this work session were embarrassing. And that's all.
Thank you. That concludes. Well, board members, before we adjourn, I just want to say that a lot of information has been disseminated this evening. I know several of you have said at the next meeting or in an upcoming meeting, I would like to see such and such. Been trying to keep track of the meeting myself and where we are. So I would simply ask you if there are certain items that you want us to continue to address, if you would be so kind and email Susan. So as superintendent and I sit down to set the next two meetings of May 12th and May the 26th, we can discuss those. Someone had their hand up. Was that Ms. Fortney? Go ahead.
Thank you. Is there any way we can get a copy of those comments sent to us? I'd like to address some of the concerns personally.
Okay. Madam Superintendent, can we do that? Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. Taken care of. And Ms. Reynolds? Did you raise your hand?
Sorry. Mine was similar to Ms. Fortney, but I'm assuming that we'll have staff respond to some of those questions as they
Yes.
were pretty specific. Is there
Yes.
any way that some of them that are more general, we could also have our communications department post a Q&A type sheet
Oh,
on the
good.
Facebook page and on the website?
Yes. And I also need to say, there were some comments that came in that were directed specifically as to how do I get a job and apply to the Polk County School District and things like that. And Mrs. Worthington has gone ahead and forwarded that to the appropriate departments.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other comments? If not, the next order of business is adjournment. Board members, there being no further business, this meeting of the Polk County School Board is now adjourned.